Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was Born with the Greatest Hero Quirk Ever? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku's first memory is of his second birthday. His mother and grandfather are there, one bearing a bright green cake and the other bearing a case of brightly illustrated books. Grandpa uses his fire quirk to light the candles. His father is not there. Instead, his mother turns on the TV to the daily news update and brings him close to the screen. A man in a sleek, black and red costume stands proudly before the camera, his hand on the neck of a scruffy criminal. Izuku's tiny hands reach out to pat the screen. He sees Papa more on the screen than in the house. Papa looks different in his hero costume. He vaguely remembers his mother saying, "It's his son's birthday," and his grandfather coming up behind him to pat his unruly hair. Izuku stares at Papa on the screen and wonders when he'll come home. He makes many more memories after that. But the one that stands out the most is the moment almost a year later, with him yelling and screaming as his grandfather holds him back, watching his mother fall to her knees, sobbing. Izuku yells and yells for them to stop, but nobody intervenes as his father's coffin is lowered into the ground. 3 days after Kaken turns 4, he develops his quirk. It makes itself apparent through weak puffs of smoke coming from his palms, eventually turning into a loud and resolute pop of energy. It's no question what the nature of his quirk is: explosion. Izuku, who has seen this coming ever since he learned what Kaken's parents' quirks were, is not as impressed. You make nitro and nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin. Izuku brings out the word through tremendous effort. Even if he knows what the word means, his 3-year-old tongue can't wrap itself around the difficult syllables. Nitro what? Kaken, ever the impatient one, only makes it through the first 2 syllables. They're playing in Kaken's room, although to be more accurate, Kaken is playing. Izuku's sprawled out on the floor, doodling absent-mindedly on scraps of paper. It's what they put in TNT, Izuku says, proudly touting the knowledge he earned when he snuck one of his dad's heavy-looking books from his deserted room. It is the only reason he ever goes in there anymore. Grandpa had read the whole thing to him the last time he'd visited, making sure Izuku understood the whole thing. It had taken 3 whole days, but Izuku now knows more about chemistry than any 3-year-old ought to know. TNT is more familiar ground for Kaken, whose sharp grin returns. Yeah. So I'm gonna blow things up. Of course I get a cool quirk. He pauses in the midst of climbing his bedpost and looks at Izuku critically, the other boy engrossed in the drawing directly in front of him. He's mumbling again, about the drawing, about Kaken's quirk, about how much it must hurt when it explodes. "You'll get a quirk too, Deku," he says to the younger boy, feeling uncharacteristically generous. Maybe Deku feels bad because he'd never have Katsuki's awesome quirk. His declaration gets the other boy's attention, snapping him out of his mumbling. "But it definitely won't be as cool as mine, because I'm the best." Izuku just smiles. "I don't mind if I don't get a quirk, Kaken," he says, before returning to his drawing of an elephant. "It's fairly good." "Huh!" Kaken exclaims, jumping from his mount and standing before Izuku, fists on his hips. "How are you gonna be a hero if you don't have a quirk, stupid Deku?" Izuku shrugs without looking up. Not everyone wants to be a hero. 2 weeks after Izuku turns 4, Kaken bursts through his bedroom door. Izuku looks up from his ABCs. A is for All Might, which his mother had bought for him. It's slightly more colorful than the book Grandpa had gotten. A is for Amino Acid. Izuku has yet to read that book on his own. "Do you have your quirk yet?" Kaken demands, but it comes out more "Doyo have your quirk yet?" "I don't think so," Izuku says. "Maybe I don't have one." If I don't have one, he thinks, then maybe people will stop thinking I want to be a hero. Kaken fumes. "You're just late," he seethes, pointing accusingly at Izuku. "You have a quirk, stupid Deku. And I bet it'll come anytime soon, and then we can battle and I'm gonna beat you." He turns on his heels and leaves, slamming the door behind him. "But I don't want to fight you," Izuku calls out, but it falls on deaf ears. Or maybe Kakin didn't hear it at all. He frowns, then turns back to his book. C is for Crimson Riot. Everyone, it seems, is fixated on the appearance of his quirk. Everyone except for him. A month later, Izuku gets the first hint of his quirk, although it will be years before he looks back and understands the significance of the event. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say. Izuku will mutter someday in the future. If I had known it was my quirk, I would have been more careful and maybe I wouldn't be in this goddamn mess. Izuku is walking happily home from a productive day at the library, muttering contemplatively over the various notes he's written down in his tiny notebook when a loud cry catches his attention. He turns to the source of the sound and sees an old woman standing fretfully at the base of a tree, looking up at a yowling white kitten. It's just like in stories, Izuku muses. A cat is stuck in a tree, and someone kind will save it. He looks around, but no one seems to be coming to the woman's rescue. A heavy and insistent feeling settles in his stomach, urging him to do something. He sighs and puts his notebook away in his backpack before walking over. "Good afternoon," he greets her, remembering to be polite and not to mumble. "Oh, good afternoon," the old lady replies, momentarily cheered by the affable manners of the admittedly adorable child. "Is that your cat in the tree?" Izuku inquires. Above them, the kitten lets out another plaintive meow, pacing anxiously on a branch. "Oh dear," the old lady says, then nods. "Emi has been stuck up there for almost an hour." "I can get her," Izuku says, and before the lady can reply, he sets down his backpack and climbs nimbly up the tree. He's no stranger to doing so, having climbed up countless trunks in pursuit of nesting birds to study and admire. In less than a minute he's face to face with the pretty kitten, which tilts her head, studying him. He extends a hand, gripping tightly onto the bark of the tree. "Here, Emi." He calls her by name, and makes what he hopes is a comforting smile. The kitten meows twice before deciding to trust him, and she pads over daintily to settle in his palm. He pulls her in and holds her close to his body, and she allows the handling without so much as a wiggle. Carefully, he begins to descend. "Oh my," says the old lady as Izuku nears the ground. "Be careful, dearie." He hops nimbly down the last few feet and turns to her, gently holding Emi in both hands. "Emi," the woman cries, and gladly takes the kitten from his hands. Emi meows lovingly, then starts to purr in the hands of her owner. "Thank you so much, young man," the old lady says, smiling at Izuku. "You saved Emi for me." Izuku smiles back. "It was nothing. I'm glad she's okay." "What a good child," the old lady sighs fondly, placing her wrinkled cheek on her wrinkled hand. She starts rummaging in her purse and takes out a couple of candy bars. "Here you are. It's not much, but it's the least I can do for Emi's hero," she says. "Oh, I'm not," Izuku begins, but he stops cold when he sees that these are full-size Snickers. He wasn't even allowed to eat a full one on his own. "Thank you." "No, thank you," insists the old lady. With a pat on his head and one final wave, she leaves. Izuku takes a moment to stare at his bounty, before placing them in his backpack. He starts walking back home, mood greatly improved. He never notices that she had called him a hero. Grandpa watches him for a day while his mother goes out with friends. "You're too kind, Hisahito-san," Inko gushes, but Grandpa insists it's no trouble for him at all. Izuku likes Grandpa's house. It's big and spacious, and the floors are made of shiny wood that he can slide on in his socks. There's always the smell of tea floating around the house, and there's always a plate full of buttered biscuits waiting for him when he visits. There's also the fact that as soon as tea time is finished, Grandpa lets him go into the library. "I got a new set of encyclopedias," Grandpa says as he idly follows Izuku to the library. Izuku practically bounces with excitement in front of the door, waiting for Grandpa to unlock it. Once he does, Izuku rushes in, admiring the rays of sunlight that fall from the wide, round windows near the ceiling. The library is, as always, pristine. No speck of dust mars the lovingly maintained covers of the books. Izuku quickly spots a set of books that weren't there the last time he visited. He points at them. "Are those the new books?" he asks. Grandpa nods. Izuku beams and wastes no time in picking up the first volume. For as long as he can remember, spending time with Grandpa is like this. The two of them read quietly, until Izuku encounters a term he doesn't understand and has to ask Grandpa what it means. Grandpa will explain it, often more comprehensively than he has to, and if Izuku asks enough questions, Grandpa will eventually sit beside him until he reads the whole book. Izuku doesn't have too many questions these days, but sometimes he ends up sitting beside Grandpa anyways, relishing in his quiet comfort. Grandpa is Izuku's grandfather on his father's side. Inko's parents are both dead. Izuku never knew them, or Grandpa's wife. Aside from Inko, Grandpa is Izuku's only family. He is a more prominent feature in his life than his father ever was. Grandpa is the reason that Izuku's always at the top of the class. Grandpa is the reason Izuku is so interested in quirks despite not having one of his own, to the point of having 12 full journals detailing the quirks of the people around him. An entire section is dedicated just to Kaken, if only because he's the closest available subject. Grandpa is the reason that Inko and Izuku are never lonely, the reason Izuku even looks forward to any of his birthdays. No questions so far? Grandpa murmurs. He sits in his usual leather armchair, with a thick book in his lap. There's an entire wing in the library that Izuku hasn't touched, because the books are too difficult even for him. It's full of medical journals, some of them focused solely on quirks. Grandpa promised him before that he'd be allowed to read them as soon as he was older. None, Izuku replies. But he gets up from his seat and sits by Grandpa's feet anyway. He spends the rest of the afternoon mumbling over his book until his mother comes in the evening to pick him up. There must be something in the trees around here, Izuku muses at one point. The number of cats getting stuck in trees is plainly ridiculous. He turns 6 and there's still no sign of his quirk showing up, but he has 58 cat rescues to his name. He would know. He counted. He's also counted the number of times Kaken asks him if he still doesn't have a quirk. It's at a much higher figure of 91. Since the first time, he's rescued Emmy from a tree around 17 times now. Mrs. Ando, Emmy's long-suffering owner, is now something of a family friend. "Oh, you're too kind, Inko-chan," she gushes as Izuku's mother serves her a hot cup of tea. Mrs. Ando visits them from time to time, and she always has some delectable candy to give to Izuku. I see where Izuku gets it from. Inko blushes but brightens at the praise for her son. Did Izuku have to rescue Emmy again today? Yes, Mrs. Ando sighs, looking fondly at the cat in question. She's glued to Izuku, who's lying flat on the carpet, letting the cat paw affectionately at his face. I actually think she's just doing it for attention now. She's been attached to Izuku since she first met him, a fine choice, I must say. Inko beams. Izuku does seem to have a knack for rescuing cats. Why, you aren't the only pet owner who's come here to offer thanks. I'm sure it means a lot to him. She's quieter when she says the next bit. I'm glad he knows he can help people even without a quirk. Inko-chan, Mrs. Ando says, placing a hand over Inko's. Your son doesn't need a quirk to be a good person. Why, that Bakugu child has a quirk, and all he uses it for is scaring animals and other kids. Such a difference from Izuku, I must say. Oh, Katsuki? Inko chuckles. He's not a bad kid. Maybe a little spoiled and vain, but he will grow. He's quite attached to Izuku, you know. He comes over to play quite often. Izuku doesn't seem to mind not having a quirk, but Katsuki insists he's just a late bloomer. He worries about Izuku in his own way. It's quite sweet, really. Well, Mrs. Ando says, still doubtful. I wish he wouldn't yell so much. It's quite fine that he's friends with Izuku, but I worry when he screams at the other children. Kaken only yells at people if they're being mean or laugh at him, Izuku pipes up from the floor. Both women turn to look at him. Sometimes some kids call me quirkless, and Kaken yells at them till they go away. Almost as an afterthought, he adds, he's very good at yelling. Inko looks at Mrs. Ando as if to say, I told you so. Is that so? The older woman says. Izuku nods absently. Kaken says we're gonna be heroes together, so they shouldn't be calling me quirkless, he continues. Emmy gently bops her paw against his nose, before curling up into a ball on his chest. But I don't want to be a hero, Mrs. Ando frowns, but Inko is unfazed. She smiles a little sadly, knowing what Izuku will say next. Why not, Izukin? Mrs. Ando asks. Because, Izuku says, placing a small hand on Emi's head. You don't have to be a hero to help people. Katsuki is restless. When he's restless, sweat gathers in his palms and goes off with no prompting. He and Izuku have grown desensitized to the crackling sounds and the sudden waves of heat, but he still has to remember to be mindful in the presence of people and use to his quirk and its effects. Speaking of quirks and speaking of Deku, do you really not care if you don't have a quirk? He asks. It's late and they should be sleeping, and he asks this question with no preamble. A futon laid out on Izuku's bedroom floor is as familiar to Katsuki as his own bed at home, but he can't sleep. Not tonight. Izuku is awake to. Not really, he replies, and Katsuki knows he isn't lying. Why not? He mutters sullenly. He's embarrassed for caring more about the matter than Izuku did himself, but he can't help it. He can't understand how someone could not want a quirk. Izuku hums thoughtfully. Did you know that technology is advancing so much faster now than it ever did? It took people ages to make the wheel, then a shorter time to make a car, and then less than 100 years later, they're in space. Katsuki's brow furrows. This doesn't sound like an answer. Quirks were developed just before the first modern car, I guess, Izuku says. Or earlier. Grandpa must have told me, but I forget. But before that, people were just people. What's your point, Deku? Katsuki asks. My point, Izuku says, is that people don't need quirks to do things. We don't need quirks to help people, to get jobs, or to just survive. Sure, having a quirk would be nice, but it still depends on what kind of person you are, what you can do. There is silence. Then Katsuki makes a noise that sounds suspiciously like a laugh. Maybe your quirk is being smart, he scoffs, but it's lighthearted. Wouldn't that be just like you stupid nerd? Izuku laughs quietly. Whatever my quirk is, if I even have one, I didn't need it to save Emi from the tree again this afternoon. Ando's cat? Again? Oh yeah. But this time, she was so upset. She was. Katsuki drowses off to the sound of Izuku's voice. His palms are dry and steady as he drifts off into sleep, already dreaming about a hero's future, just waiting at his fingertips. Maybe, if it's a nice dream, Deku'll be there too. Izuku is getting suspicious. This is the second time this week that someone just so happened to be getting bullied in the playground. The 8th time this month. And for the months prior, just like the epidemic of stranded cats, there seems to be an epidemic of bigger kids picking on the little ones. And it always seems to happen just when he's passing by. He steps in every time, the heavy and insistent feeling settling in his gut, familiar by now after countless interventions. He dismisses it as a sense of duty and oh, how accurate and yet mistaken that is, all at the same time. Most kids in the neighborhood know him. They know that if they hurt Midoriya Izuku, Bakugo Katsuki will find them and unleash his fury upon them, backed up by his now considerable control of his powerful quirk. Kids who have cats know Izuku as the one who rescues them from trees, so there's that too. Today, Izuku finds Takashi standing before a cowering little boy. Takashi is an unusually big boy for his age, standing much taller and broader than Izuku although they are both only 10. His quirk is almost stereotypically perfect for bullying. It's called Intimidate, and it allows him to, well, intimidate a target into doing almost anything for a certain amount of time. Izuku knows, through extensive observation, that Takashi's quirk only lasts 5 minutes, tops. He also knows that it doesn't work if the target is expecting its effects. Takashi-kun, Izuku says quietly. Takashi and the smaller boy turn to look at him. Izuku recognizes the other one. It's Yashiro, a recent transferee to their elementary school. If he remembers correctly, his quirk is the ability to transform small amounts of water into different states of matter. Midoriya, Takashi says with a grunt. And a nod, his face falling. He knows he can't use his quirk on Izuku, and he's acquainted with Katsuki, unfortunately. He's also the doting owner of a tabby he calls Teiko, who owes every single one of its 9 lives to Izuku's saving graces. Knowing his hands are basically tied, Takashi sighs and glares at Yashiro one more time. "I'll see you around, nerd," he mutters before slinking off, presumably to feed his cat or something. Izuku shakes his head. Years of being friends with Kaken has turned the word nerd into little more than a slightly unflattering nickname. Yashiro lets out a breath of relief and turns, shaking, to Izuku. "Midoriya-san, right?" he asks nervously. Izuku nods. "You can call me Izuku. And you're Yashiro-san. We're in the same class, you know." "Ah," Yashiro says, ducking his head sheepishly. "I'm sorry. I haven't memorized everyone's names yet." "That's fine," Izuku says. "You're still new. You should probably go, though. Takashi-kun might come back, or he might not." "I don't know." A little voice pipes up in Izuku's head. "He probably won't, seeing as I won't be around." It's too faint for him to notice. Yashiro stutters. Thank you for helping me. The way he just left when you came, it was amazing." "Oh, that," Izuku says dismissively. "He just knows he can't use his quirk on me." Yashiro's eyes go wide. "Really? His quirk doesn't work on you? Is that your quirk?" he asks excitedly. Izuku shakes his head. "As far as I know, I'm quirkless." He ignores Yashiro's slight gasp, used to such reactions. "His quirk doesn't work on you if you're expecting it, so try not to get caught off guard again." Yashiro frowns thoughtfully. "If you're expecting it? I see." He looks at Izuku again, something akin to reverence in his eyes. "You're amazing, Izuku-kun." "Like I said, it's nothing," Izuku repeats. He subtly checks his watch, wanting to go home and start on the inhuman amount of sums their math teacher set for them today. Grandpa is also coming with a new book. He can barely wait to see what it'll be. Yashiro shakes his head. "No, you're just like a hero, Izuku-kun. You helped me out. Nobody's helped me out before." Izuku sighs, but he feels for this kid. He's heard the hero line before though, too many times for his liking. "I see," he says simply, wanting more than anything to just go home. "But anyway, I have to go now. I'll see you around, Yashiro-san. Take care." "Thank you." Yashiro yells as he leaves, and Izuku has to smile. Hero or not, it still feels good to help someone out. Deku, Kaken begins, tone dangerous, but curious, like a cobra who's encountered a mouse who learned to hiss back. "Yes." Izuku says. "Mind telling me why the heck all those kids rushed you at recess and gave you all of this?" Kaken says, gesturing at the various snacks spread across Izuku's desk. They're in Izuku's bedroom, and the boy himself is meticulously dividing up the food on his desk into piles of candy, chocolate, and biscuits. He sets aside 2 packs of sour gummies for Kaken, knowing the other boy is strangely partial to those sweets. Earlier today, a group of children, some in their grade, most of them younger, had swarmed around Izuku the moment recess began. Some of them were there to thank him on behalf of their families for rescuing their cat again, but most were there to thank him for defending them, whether it was Takashi or Riku or Kayasuke. A veritable army of grateful children led by Yashiro could carry a ton of snacks, it turns out. "Don't feel bad, Kaken," Izuku says reassuringly. He pats the sour gummies he'd set aside. "You can have these." Kaken's glare is murderous. "Like hell I care about that," he yells. He grabs the sour gummies and violently tears it open, munching furiously on a handful of helpless gummies. "I asked you why the heck those losers crowded you in the first place." Izuku shrugs. "I think they wanted to thank me or something." He picks up a bag of matcha candies and wrinkles his nose. "That is going to his mother." Katsuki scoffs. "Thank you? Thank you? What the hell for?" "I helped them out," Izuku says. "Either I saved their cat, or I told off someone who was bullying them. Speaking of the bullying, I think they should be thanking you instead. Those bullies only listen to me because they know you'd murder them if they tried anything funny." The other boy glares. "It's their own fault," Kaken grouses, crumpling the empty pack of sour gummies and throwing it hard into the waste bin under the desk. "Say what you will about Bakugo Katsuki, but the kid doesn't litter. Of course I'm gonna hit them for being stupid." And if those losers even think of trying to swarm me and giving me all this useless junk, then I'm going to hit them too. Yes, yes, Izuku says, discreetly passing the second pack of gummies to Kaken, who takes it without even noticing. Why do you even bother helping them, Deku? Kaken asks. He backs off from the desk and goes to lie down on Izuku's bed. Izuku cringes at the thought of him eating there, but at least he's eating gummies and not crackers, which he has the unfortunate tendency of biting into so hard that crumbs fly off everywhere. Thought you didn't care about being a hero and all that. Besides, it's not like someone quirkless like you can do much. Sometime after they turned 10, Katsuki finally gave the whole, "Do you have your quirk yet?" business arrest. The facts were just irrefutable. Izuku was 10, and he wasn't able to breathe fire or pull objects to him, two of the most likely quirks that could be passed on to him. In fact, aside from being incredibly smart for his age but not quite smart enough to warrant it being a mental augmentation quirk, he was incredibly normal. Granted, they hadn't gotten his foot x-rayed to check for a pinky joint, but Izuku had always maintained that it would be a waste of money, and he really didn't care either way. But was passing by, Izuku says, by way of explanation. He absently opens a box of Pocky and picks one out. Nobody else was gonna help them, so I did it. Idiot. That's what you call people like me for. The real heroes. Kaken sits up abruptly, pumping his fist in the air and sending about a dozen gummies flying. Amid Izuku's aghast exclamations of, "Kaken!" he rises triumphantly and stands on the bed. "I'm the hero, Deku. And don't forget that." Yes, yes, Izuku agrees quickly, hoping to placate him. "Now please, Kaken, get off, you're getting candy all over my bed." Kaken frowns, but sits back down and at least picks up the gummies that have landed on the bed. Those are somewhat salvageable, while Izuku picks up the poor gummies which landed on the floor and throws them away. "What a waste, Kaken," he mumbles. Sour candy is not his thing, but food is food. The other boy scoffs. "It's just candy, duh. Besides, those losers'll give you anything if you just ask for it." He shakes his head. "Lame if you ask me." Izuku smiles slightly and returns to his desk, scrutinizing his arrangement. "Well, what about you, Kaken? What would you do for someone who helped you out?" Kaken picks out a red gummy. "I'd punch them," he says flatly, crushing the sweet in his fingers. "And ask them where the hell they get off, thinking I need their help." "Chocolate or strawberry?" "Vanilla," Izuku says with no hesitation. Yashiro says, laughing. "That's so boring, Izuku-an." "Vanilla is really good," Izuku says, frowning slightly. "You just haven't had the right vanilla ice cream. Besides, you can put anything on it. Chocolate, sprinkles, caramel, marshmallows." He trails off, looking at the various ice creams in the freezer box of the store. "But that's exactly it. It's so plain that it needs add-ons," Yashiro argues. "Whereas if you had, say, Rocky Road ice cream, you could eat it exactly as it is and you wouldn't need anything else." "But isn't Rocky Road just chocolate ice cream with add-ons?" "Deku!" Izuku and Yashiro look up to see Katsuki marching over them, a furious glint in his eyes, not that there ever isn't. Yashiro breaks a sweat. He didn't think Katsuki would be at the convenience store today. "Kaken," Izuku greets him, smiling. Beside him, Yashiro stares at him. Izuku may well be the only child in their school, in this area, who could look Katsuki in the eye when he's in that mood and smile. He shakes his head. Izuku truly is amazing. Katsuki arrives and looks at Yashiro coolly, surveying him from top to bottom. Yashiro shrinks back, uncomfortable. Katsuki has a way of looking at people that makes them feel unworthy of his attention, just another someone to get stuck under his shoe like garbage. "What are you doing hanging out with this loser?" "We're getting ice cream," Izuku says patiently. "And he's not a loser. His name is Yashiro. He's the one who got the sour gummies, you know." Yashiro flushes. He's heard from Izuku sometime after the candy incident that his sour gummies had gone to Katsuki instead of Izuku. Granted, the sour gummies weren't the only candies he'd gotten for Izuku, but it still bothered him slightly that his gift had gone to someone who was less likely to appreciate them. "He's a loser if I say so, Deku." Kaken speaks as if his word is law, And maybe for all other mortals except Midoriya Izuku it is. The boy himself just laughs and asks, "What about you, Kaken? You like chocolate, don't you? They have a chocolate ice cream here today that has fudge in the center. I think you'll like it." He reaches in the freezer, idly rummaging around for the treat in question, before pulling it out and showing it to Kaken. Kaken scoffs. "You're such a nerd," he spits out, then snatches the ice cream from Izuku's hand. "Hurry up and buy your stupid ice cream. You're coming over today? Or did you FING forget?" "Ah, right," Izuku says as Kaken stalks over to the counter. Yashiro watches as Izuku gets a vanilla cone and smiles apologetically at him. Sorry about Kaken. He's really not good with names, so he just calls everyone a loser. Don't take it personally. Yashiro shakes his head, half-dazed. Getting offended is the furthest thing from people's minds when Bakugo Katsuki's towering over them. "I'm amazed, Izuku-kun. You must be really awesome if Bakugo listens to you like that." Izuku laughs. "No, we've just been friends for too long. We've been together practically since we were born, because our mothers are really good friends. You know how I'm quirkless? Kaken used to get really mad about me saying I'm quirkless and all, and kept insisting I'm just a late bloomer or something. He was always going on about being heroes and all that." He shakes his head. "Even though I never wanted to be a hero." There it is again, Yashiro notices. Every time Izuku is called heroic for his actions, he quickly denies it and even seems uncomfortable. He doesn't understand it. How could anyone dislike being called a hero? Sure, not everyone would be able to become a professional hero. Quirkless people like Izuku would have an even harder time, considering the nature of the work. But professional heroes are not the only heroes. People like Izuku, kind, selfless, and humble, are definitely heroes. Before Yashiro can ask, though, Katsuki's yelling again. "Deku, I told you to hurry up." "Coming." Izuku calls out, then clamps his hand over his mouth, remembering he's still in the store. "I'll see you on Monday, Yashiro-san." He rushes off to the counter, where Katsuki's waiting impatiently. Yashiro shakes his head as Katsuki berates Izuku for being slow. The boy must be blind if he believes for a second that Izuku's actually letting himself be ordered around. For the second time in his young life, Izuku's world is shattered. Someone from the nearby hospital calls Inko to inform her of the incident. It was a villain attack, they say. A major one, the likes of which were usually extremely rare in their peaceful neighborhood. Grandpa and about a dozen others had been caught in the crossfire. Nobody had been able to save him. Probably nobody had tried. The authorities tell her that the body couldn't even be recovered under all the rubble. He had probably been crushed. All they could find was a scrap of his tweed jacket, the shattered remains of his spectacles, and his wallet. The last item had his IDs in it. It was the only way they had even been able to name him as one of the casualties. Of the 15 or so known casualties, only 5 bodies had been recovered. They say that considering the damage and the power of the attack, 15 casualties was a miraculously low number. 16, if you count the villain being unceremoniously gunned down while they were vulnerable. The authorities are actually considering this successful. Mitsuki Bakugo comes over the moment the news story breaks. She brings her husband and son, the latter of which immediately marches over to Izuku's room. Masaru makes tea while his wife tries to console a weeping Inko. Through her sobbing, it's hard to make out her words, but Mitsuki tries. "Izuku, Izuku, Izuku." Kaken, feeling strangely contrite in the face of unimaginable loss, knocks on the door. It swings open on impact. Izuku hasn't locked himself in like he thought he might. Inside the room, Izuku sits on the edge of his bed. His hands are knit together on top of his lap, but they're steady. He's facing away from Kaken, who can't see the other boy's expression. "Deku," he greets quietly. Izuku doesn't acknowledge him, and for some time, the room stays silent. Down the hall, they can hear Inko's muffled crying as her face is pressed into Mitsuki's shoulder. "Hurricane," Izuku says suddenly. Kaken startles at the sound of his voice, raspy and dry. According to Inko, Izuku has been sick for a couple of days. Hearing about the incident has only worsened his condition. Airlock, duodenum, red eagle. Golden Star. Kaken recognizes those names. 5 pro heroes at the scene. Izuku continues ruthlessly. Airlock's specialty is containment and apprehension. Red Eagle specializes in rescue. Even so, 15 people are dead. People are saying it's a miracle only 15 people died. The villain's apparently one of the 10 most wanted criminals, and it's amazing they were able to take him down. But it doesn't change the fact that not even the heroes were able to save everyone. Izuku turns to face Kaken, and the look in his eyes would haunt the other boy for months to come. What do you think? Still want to be a hero, Kaken? Grandpa has apparently left his entire house and considerable savings to Inko. The library, however, is registered particularly in Izuku's name. Izuku looks for a book on medical conditions. He'd been sick for days, but on the day of the attack he'd suffered stomach cramps so terrible he couldn't get out of bed if he wanted to. In time, he will read the entire library, even the books he couldn't read before. But that is the future. For now, Izuku learns to move on. His mother is mostly worried for him. She knows how much he loves his grandfather, how much he treasured their time together. But Izuku is his grandpa's grandchild, through and through. He allows himself to feel his emotions and then stores them away. He has to be strong now, both for his mother and himself. He puts on a blank and stoic face at the memorial. His mother had insisted that he didn't have to attend, not if he didn't want to, but Izuku would never dishonor his grandfather's memory like that. 2 of the pro heroes who had been present at the attack, Duodenum and Red Eagle, are in attendance. They've been attending the funerals of the casualties of the villain attack. Red Eagle looks small and slight without her usual costume of red mechanical wings. Her golden eyes, capable of identifying people from miles away, zero in on the face of the boy standing before her now. Izuku regards her, as she appears to think nervously on what she can say. She's covered in bandages. She'd been knocked out of the sky at one point during the fight. Without her hero suit, she's only taller than Izuku by a head. She looks tiny. She looks so vulnerable. Izuku can't believe someone like this is a hero. "I'm sorry for your loss," she finally says, then immediately makes a face like she regretted what she just said. Even her voice is small, bird-like. Everything about her makes her seem so young. "You might think that it's presumptuous of us to be attending these funerals, the funerals of the people I couldn't save," she begins. "But, I really wish we could have done more. It was our job as heroes. Our failure is unforgivable." She ends this passionate statement with a low bow, facing the ground directly. Beside her, Duodenum stands silently. Izuku does not know what to say. He cannot find it in him to forgive them. Not just yet. Not while the wound is fresh and new. Not when her words betray her naivety and self-importance, the thought that heroes can save everyone, anyone, so her inability to do so must be a failure on her part. It's ridiculous. Izuku does not cry. Instead, he bows as low as she does, prompting her to look up. "Thank you for saving the city," he says quietly. He straightens and turns away to return to his mother's side, ignoring the tears that had sprung into Red Eagle's eyes. Life continues. It always does. Izuku gets into his first life-or-death situation when he is 12 and walking home from school. "It always happens when I'm walking home from school," he thinks later on. Maybe he should start taking another route. Izuku's not actually the one who's in danger, it's a girl named Kimi, a classmate of his with doll-like features and a sweet voice prone to insulting people she deems ugly, or, at the very least, not as pretty as she is. Her quirk allows her to change her hair color at whim, and she usually uses it to imitate celebrities or idols in order to appear more appealing. Well, anyway, her hair's going to be blood red if nobody pushes her out of the car's way. And so Izuku leaps, skinny limbs pumped full of adrenaline as he leaps for all he is worth and shoves her out of the way, curling around her as he tries to tuck his legs and arms out of the car's way. The driver thankfully swerves, or tries to swerve, and a quick slam on the brakes has it skidding to stop, bumper just a few millimeters from the fence of the playground. That goddamn playground. Izuku's lungs suck air in greedily, inhaling and exhaling as quickly as he can keep up. His stomach is curling in on itself, impossibly tense. Beneath him, Kimi lays on the ground, hair and dress a mess but wholly, blessedly intact. Around them, adults are panicking. The driver gets out of the car and is the first to approach them. "Kid, are you okay?" he asks worriedly, and Izuku isn't too sure which one of them he's asking. "Are you guys hurt?" Izuku sits up. He pats himself all over, and the only thing worth noting is the bruising that's quickly making itself evident on his knees. "Just some bruising," he says, feeling the pressure in his gut receding. His mind flashes briefly to the medical book he'd taken from the library. He doesn't feel any alarming symptoms. He turns to Kimi, who is starting to sit up. He's worried she'll start crying. It would be a normal reaction. He just isn't sure if he's equipped enough to handle a crying girl right now. "You," she murmurs incomprehensibly. "Kimi-san?" Izuku asks, leaning in closer. He's unprepared for the feeling of thin arms wrapping themselves tightly around him and there's some bruising on his back. Thank you, Izuku," she sobs, tucking her face into the crook of his neck. She's trembling and shaking all over, but she's alive, and Izuku did that. He saved her. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The driver approaches the two of them and kneels, gently placing a hand on Izuku's free shoulder. "You did a real good thing today, kid," he says kindly. "You should be proud of yourself. You're a real hero." That statement is a blow to him. He does not understand how it makes him feel. Izuku hesitantly raises his hand, then places it on Kimi's head, stroking her silky hair over and over as she continues to cry. Around them, people are laughing and smiling, relieved that no one was hurt and amazed at the bravery shown by the little boy they all know, the boy who's helped so many. "I'm not a hero," Izuku says, shaking his head. His voice is almost defiant. If a child could save someone this easily, then why? "I'm not a hero." No one hears him except for Kimi, who lets out a shaky sob and says, "You are. You are." Emmy gets stuck in a tree again. Mrs. Ando is faithfully standing beneath the branch her cat is perched on, looking more exasperated than anything. "Why are you climbing trees again, Emmy?" she asks, reprimanding. "We already visited Izuku yesterday. It's too soon to be clamoring for his attention like this again." "Mrs. Ando?" someone calls, and she turns to see Izuku. He sees her standing under a tree and makes a face of understanding. Wordlessly, he climbs the tree, movements already second nature, and in no time at all has a purring cat snuggled comfortably in his arms. "Looks like someone misses me, huh?" He laughs quietly, dangling his fingers in front of her face. She licks it affectionately, pawing at him. He hands her off gently to Mrs. Ando, who looks at him fondly. Izuku is so strong, she thinks. His smile is returning, slowly but surely. "Thank you, Izuku. I really should have gotten home some time ago, but this little girl decided to be a troublemaker," she sighs, stroking Emmy's pristine fur. "It's no trouble at all," Izuku says. "I was just on my way to," he pauses, "the library. I'm glad I happened to pass by." "Well, thank you anyways, Izuku," she says. She smiles at him, then looks over his shoulder. "Oh my, I think someone's waiting for you." He turns around to follow her gaze and sees a young girl standing a little ways off, clutching a small basket. Izuku is surprised to notice that it's Kimi. He hasn't talked to her since the incident. She jumps a little when they turn around to look at her so suddenly, but she meets their gazes, if a little sullenly. "I'll see you around then, Izuku," Mrs. Ando says. She has a little, knowing smile on her face. She was, after all, present during the almost car accident. "Please tell your mother that I'd like to visit her sometime next week. My son brought some delicious biscuits I'd like to share with you too." Izuku says. "Okay." He bows lightly to her as she leaves, then turns to jog over to Kimi, who suddenly looks like she wishes she could be anywhere but here. "Kimi-san," he greets her. Do you want to go talk or something?" She looks down at the ground. Her hair is bright pink today. "It's rather pretty." "Yes," he prompts. Kimi stares at the ground as though wishing it would swallow her up. Do you want to go shopping with me?" she finally bites out. Izuku's face must look priceless. Shopping? With Kimi? What would that even entail? I mean I wouldn't mind, I guess, but I'm not sure I'd be much help. You can carry the stuff I buy, Kimmy says, finally looking up. She's meeting his gaze determinedly. My mom asked me to get a lot of groceries, and I'm pretty sure I can't carry it all. Ah, Izuku says again. Don't you have, other friends who could help you out? I mean someone other than me? No offense, Kimmy-san, but this is kind of coming from nowhere. I'm asking you to come with me, Kimmy declares, pointing at him. And besides, aren't you supposed to be helping people? What kind of hero would you be if you didn't help a poor girl out? Izuku pouts. Alright, I'll go with you. Kimmy-san. Just don't call me a hero. Good. Kimmy says. Her hair settles into a lighter, paler pink, almost as if to signify her relief. And I'll call you whatever I want, she adds almost as an afterthought. He rolls his eyes and falls into step beside her as they walk away from the park. She grows quiet, thoughtful, almost, and Izuku is all too happy to leave her alone with her thoughts. They enter the shopping district not too long after that. Kimmy pulls out a small note from her bag and inspects it. Well, my mom asked me to get some vegetables and meat and some gardening supplies. And cheese, milk. Sounds like we should get a move on if we want to finish before it gets dark, Izuku comments, looking over her shoulder to read the list. That's a lot. Kimmy sighs. We should probably go to the supermarket first. She looks up and notices Izuku peering at the list and visibly jumps back. Right, let's go. The process is surprisingly pleasant. Izuku isn't too upset about giving up a Saturday afternoon at the library to accompany Kimmy. It's incredibly similar to shopping with his mom. Both of them are terrifyingly efficient and extremely critical of the smallest differences in price and nutritional content. Which one, Izuku? Kimmy asks, holding up 2 brands of yogurt. Izuku wrinkles his nose. Yogurt isn't on the list, is it? No, but I want yogurt, Kimmy says, lowering the goods to examine them herself. And my mom lets me get some stuff for myself if I do the shopping for her. Huh. Izuku looks at the yogurt. They stand there for a comically long amount of time, examining the 2 brands seriously. Izuku dissolves into mumbling immediately, and Kimmy isn't even fazed. Around them, mothers smile fondly, some shaking their heads and saying, "What good kids." I've had this one before. Izuku finally points at the one in Kimmy's right hand. And it's pretty good. The nutritional content is pretty balanced, and besides, it's the cheaper one. Kimmy says, tilting her head. Okay. She sets the other one back in the fridge. Now help me decide between flavors. They spend another 5 minutes arguing vehemently about whether or not vanilla is a valid candidate for best flavor. It is. With the groceries secured, they walk over to a hardware store. Kimmy's mother had included instructions to buy a new watering can, since their old one was getting faded. There's an even wider variety here, and they take even longer than they did in the grocery. You know what, I don't think Mom really cares what the watering can looks like as long as it's big enough and does its job, Kimmy finally says, after looking at what must be the 50th kind of watering can. Izuku's about ready to throw in the towel as well. Let's just get this over with. In the end, Kimmy picks out a nice, bright yellow watering can with white floral designs. It's bulky, and Izuku has to carefully apportion the goods he's carrying as he adds it to his load. At least Kimmy's carrying some of the groceries as well. The sun is setting as they walk back to Kimmy's house. They run into several acquaintances along the way, mostly people whose cats Izuku has rescued, and they all smile fondly when they see him helping out another person. How typical of Izuku, they seem to say, and while Izuku can't say it isn't pleasant to have that kind of reputation, they're getting uncomfortably close to comparing him to actual heroes. Surprisingly, Kimmy starts to talk as they walk. It starts off small, asking about Emmy and then eventually hearing about all the different cats he's rescued, and soon she starts offering stories of her own. She doesn't talk much about school, but Izuku doesn't mind, because they're both politely pretending that she didn't use to call him names when they were younger. The air between them is already weird enough. And AI-chan keeps saying that I should try turning my hair 2 different colors, but I think it'd look ridiculous, don't you, Izuku? She asks, twisting a pale pink lock of hair between her slim fingers. Izuku says, pondering it. You mean like, if the right side of your hair was a different color from your left? Like half and half? Yeah, says Kimmy, nodding seriously. Like if one side was black and the other side was white, split clean in the middle. Can you even imagine it? Izuku tries. It's all he can do to keep from laughing. Anyway. Sorry, I'm sorry, he says, struggling not to drop all the stuff he's carrying. Kimmy looks at him with an offended glint in her eyes, but she looks amused too. What if you made one side red, then the other side green? Then you could stand at an intersection and take the place of the traffic lights. Red. He turns his head one way, then bam. Green. He sharply swerves the other way. Kimmy starts laughing. Where would I even stand? I'll get hit if I'm on the street. Maybe we should build a special platform and you can stand on it, Izuku suggests in a serious tone. You'd be the traffic hero. Stoplight. Kimmy throws her head back, laughing. Izuku, you're ridiculous, she exclaims. Well, if I'm the traffic hero, then you should be the cat hero. Your name would be Izunian. Izuku wrinkles his nose. I take it back, Kimmy-san. You shouldn't be a hero, he says. Heroes wouldn't come up with names like Izunian. Kimmy giggles. Ah, wait, she says suddenly looking up. This is my house. Izuku looks at the fairly large structure. Wow. It's pretty big, Kimmy-san. I guess, Kimmy says noncommittally. She walks forward to the door and opens it. They step into a quiet, dimly lit hallway and carefully remove their shoes before going to the kitchen to deposit the groceries. Izuku puts the watering can down by the counter. Thank you, Kimmy says. She finishes putting the rest of the groceries away in cupboards as Izuku sits down and watches her. Mom isn't home yet, but would you like to stay for dinner? It's the least I can do. After you went shopping with me today. That sounds nice, but I think I should be getting home, actually, Izuku says. Mom might be getting worried by now. Kimmy nods and accompanies him back outside. He stops at the gate one last time to turn and bow slightly. Thank you for inviting me today, Kimmy-san. I had a lot of fun, he says honestly. Kimmy smiles, and it's a small but sincere smile. Thank you for coming with me, Izuku. I had a lot of fun as well. She hesitates, as if considering her next words. She starts, uncertain. I never really got to thank you properly after you saved me that time. And to apologize for getting you injured when I was being careless. There's no need, Izuku begins, but she cuts him off. I also want to apologize for the way I've treated you in the past, she says firmly. There's guilt in her voice, but her tone is resolute. And I also want to apologize for my behavior in general. I haven't exactly been the nicest person to you or to the other people in class. She's not wrong, so Izuku doesn't bother to contradict her. Instead, he simply says, I forgive you. Why? She asks. Her face is confused, but somewhat hopeful. Why? Izuku repeats, confused. What do you mean? Of course I forgive you, you weren't really. No, why did you save me that time? She asks. If you were just the least bit unlucky, you could have died. Or we both could have died. You didn't have an obligation to save me. In fact, I was horrible to you. So why? Izuku stares at her for a moment. Then he shakes his head and laughs incredulously. Kimmy-san, I don't know what kind of person you take me for, but what person would see a girl in danger and not try to help? He says. Bitterly and privately, he thinks he might know the answer to that question. But he keeps silent on that. A lot of people, she says quietly. You were the only one who helped me that day. I remember that very well. She sounds like Yashiro, Izuku thinks. He shakes his head again. What I did was nothing special, Kimmy-san. I just wanted to help. You don't have to thank me or do anything. I was already glad that you're all right, and that's more than enough for me. He must have said something wrong, because Kimmy's eyes fill with tears. In a second, she's got her arms wrapped around him, and it reminds him of the incident, of the way her thin limbs had wrapped themselves so strongly around him. You're such an idiot, Izuku, she says shakily. But then again, you help people all the time, so you must not realize. She pulls back just enough to give him a smile. You saved my life. How could I not be thankful? How can you think for a single second that I wouldn't admire you? She pauses and looks down. You know, I heard from Yashiro-kun that you dislike being called a hero. But even so, I called you that on purpose today. And for good reason. Kimi looks up and fiercely meets his eyes. You're not a pro-hero, but you're still a hero, Izuku. You're amazing and kind, and I know that everyone will see that. I'm glad I see it now. It would have been pretty awful if I never got to see that side of you, you know? She embraces him again. So stop selling yourself short. It would be embarrassing for me to admire someone who's lame, so stop trying to downplay what you do, okay? You're amazing. Don't ever forget that. Izuku is silent. Then he wordlessly buries his face in Kimi's neck and allows her to hug him tighter. She seems to understand and stays still, saying nothing about the sudden dampness she feels on her shoulder. A few minutes pass and Izuku gently leans back. Kimi does so as well, and quietly watches the boy compose himself. He raises his head and he's smiling. Thank you for today, Kimi-san, he says. I hope we can hang out sometime again. We definitely will, she says firmly. Bye for now, Izuku. As he starts walking away, he hears Kimi call, Izuku. Wait. Look at me. He turns around. Kimi is grinning hugely, carting her fingers through her long, long hair. The strands are deep green, just like his own. Does it suit me? She asks jokingly. Izuku laughs. Yes, he says sincerely, smiling. Yes, it does. It's green, she says and asks, you know what it means when traffic lights are green, right? She widens her stance and spreads her arms, pumping her hands like a cheerleader. Go, Izuku. Through their laughter, Izuku banishes the last vestiges of dampness on his eyelids. Izuku and Katsuki fight. It's not a petty argument either, the kind where they get drawn into long conversations about the merits of chocolate ice cream compared to vanilla, or the almost imperceptible difference in their heights. It's kind of hard to tell when both boys have hairstyles that add at least 2 centimeters to their normal heights. No, it's a real, honest-to-goodness fight, one that has them screaming and spitting and coming close to tears, and Izuku yells and yells but does not take anything back. It's not about you being weak, Kaken. It's not about you being powerless. It's seeing a friend fall and helping them up. Is that a crime? I thought you were hurt. What kind of friend would I be if I left you alone? Katsuki gives as good as he gets and grits his teeth. Shut up, he yells. I don't need your help. I don't need your pity. I don't need to be rescued by some useless, quirkless loser. That stings. Belatedly, Izuku wonders why. That has never hurt before. You listen to me. Katsuki roars, moving his finger into Izuku's chest and ignoring the sudden silence of his friend. I don't need your help. I will never need your help. I don't need someone like you, he spits, with all the fury and self-righteousness of a worked-up 12-year-old, someone who doesn't even really care. Izuku hates the tear the slips through, but he lets it trace its poisonous path down his cheek. He can't even pretend that that hadn't hurt, because it had. Izuku spends his time rescuing every cat in a tree, driving off every bully, and taking every single vicious word Katsuki could throw at him, because nobody else could or would. Izuku, who does nothing but care. And what does the world do but take away all that he cares for? You're right, he says quietly. I don't care. I don't care what you want, and I don't care what you need. I don't care that you don't need help, because you're going to be a hero. I don't even care about being a hero, and you know that. He looks up and looks his childhood friend in the eye. I don't care, Kaken. He takes one step forward, and Katsuki takes one step back. And if you're really set on not needing me, then I shouldn't need you either. Leave those guys alone. Don't ever try to protect me again. It's not your business what they do or say to me, Izuku says fiercely. I don't need you saving my neck either. I've never needed you, Izuku doesn't say, because he isn't sure it's true. Katsuki takes one step forward, but Izuku doesn't move. He sighs and looks down. You really need to understand this. And someday, I hope you do. Sometimes you need to be saved, Kaken, even if you don't want to. Sometimes you can't save everyone, he says. And sometimes you can't even save yourself. Katsuki opens his mouth to say something, but Izuku's tired. "Leave me alone, Kaken," he says simply, and walks away without looking back. 2 weeks later, the Bakugas adopt a kitten. Not once does it climb a tree. Losing Kaken is painful, but life does not stop for Midoriya Izuku. It never has. He supposes it's his own fault for even trying to help him, never mind that he'd fallen from a bridge, had stopped Izuku's heartbeat for a solid second, and had landed inches away from a jagged rock. After all, Kaken had told him long ago what he would do to people who tried to help him. To the credit of the universe, it seems more than happy to distract him, throwing all that it possibly could at him. He stops a supply closet from falling over an elderly janitor. He catches a younger boy as he falls from the tree he's climbing. He is the only one who rushes to the fire extinguisher when Kaken accidentally gets too rowdy in the middle of science class. The last one was awkward for everyone, especially when Kaken promptly tried to wring Izuku's neck for even coming near him. "I wasn't helping you, I wasn't helping you," Izuku repeats over and over in his head. Each time, the people involved thank him. In Kaken's case, he screams at Izuku for the first time since their fight until the teacher approaches and tells him to calm down and tell him he's just like a hero. "What a heroic young man you are. Oni, you're just like a hero. Damn it, where the hell do you get off playing hero again?" Again, one of these things is not like the others. Each time, however, he feels the same insistent tugging at his gut. Izuku is a smart kid. He's not one to believe too much in coincidences. It's not coincidence that before he's even close enough to hear the forlorn meowing of a cat stuck in a tree in his 12 years of existence, he's racked up 341 cat rescues. He's struck by a sudden discomfort in his stomach. It's too much to believe that he was simply getting a stomachache every time he happened to pass by the playground when Takashi or some other bully was frequenting it. It's no mistake that when the car had been about to hit Kimi, or when the closet was about to slam into the old man's head, or when the child came falling out of the tree he just so happened to be walking by, his gut had turned and twisted and demanded for him to do something. It's more than instinct. It's almost like a power. It's almost like a quirk. "Mom?" he asks quietly over dinner. He'll be entering junior high soon, and he feels he can't tolerate 3 more years of being drawn into ridiculous situations where he's forced to play the hero. "Yes, honey," Inko replies. He stays quiet for a little while, frowning thoughtfully before blurting, "Can we get my foot x-rayed?" Her chopsticks clatter to the table. Oh my. Izuku's sorry, it was so sudden, and what brought this on, all of a sudden, she stutters frantically. "You never wanted to get an x-ray before." Izuku grips his own chopsticks tightly and stares at his bowl of rice. "I know I said before that I don't care," he starts carefully. "And I know there haven't been any signs of my quirk manifesting, if I even have one." "Not true. My stomach begs to differ. But I guess I just want to put the matter to rest once and for all. I'll get x-rayed, they'll find the extra toe joint, and we can all just forget this whole thing." Inko looks at her son, contemplative. She looks a little sad too. She feels sad. This issue must be tearing her son up inside, no matter how much he pretends to be unaffected. "I understand, sweetie," she says gently, and she's buoyed by the sheer gratitude that floods Izuku's face. "I'll ask around for where we can get an x-ray, and then we can all move past this, like you said." She smiles. "It makes no difference to either of us, does it?" "Yes," Izuku agrees firmly. "Quirk or no, it shouldn't matter." Dr. Tsubasa is a friendly old man with a comforting aura. His grandson is in the same class as Izuku, even though they've never really talked. He's also useless. "But I don't understand," Inko says blankly. "There have been no signs. No hints. Nothing." "The x-ray does not lie, Mrs. Midoriya," the doctor says kindly but firmly. He taps the x-ray again. He's missing the extra toe joint. The probability that he does indeed have a quirk is incredibly high. "But how can I?" Izuku asks desperately. "Please," he wants to say. "Please explain it away. Please tell me I can't have a quirk. Please tell me I don't have a quirk." "There's 2 possibilities," Dr. Tsubasa explains. "1, you may have developed your quirk. but its symptoms and/or effects are too specific or unobtrusive for you to notice. Cases like someone having a balancing quirk, because of it, they never fall or trip by accident. In those situations the effect is too common to actually perceive. And the second? Inko prompts. The second is that you're a late bloomer, says Dr. Tsubasa. In which case there are two possibilities yet again. The first is that you are simply a late bloomer. Time is the only element you require. If I recall correctly, the oldest anyone's been when they manifested their quirk for the first time is 13. So, you have still some time if that's the case. The second possibility is that your quirk is triggered by extremely specific circumstances, he continues. There are cases where people's quirks were triggered by stressful situations, such as life or death incidents, and probably wouldn't have discovered their quirk otherwise. There's a third possibility, and it's the real one. Izuku thinks miserably. I have a quirk and I know what it is. I just won't tell anyone about it or even acknowledge it because I don't want a quirk. Out loud, he says, what are the chances that I really don't have a quirk? Izuku asks. Dr. Tsubasa raises an eyebrow at his hopeful tone, so he dials it down. Considering that I'm missing the pinky joint. Practically zero, the doctor says definitively. You being a late bloomer or having an unobtrusive quirk is much more likely. Those words are the final nail in the coffin. Izuku covers his face with his hands and leans over, trying his damnedest not to cry. His mother rubs his back soothingly, while the doctor makes a sound of consolation. It's okay, Izuku, Inko says gently. Whether your quirk comes or not, you don't need it. You've always been a wonderful boy and nothing could change that. Precisely, Dr. Tsubasa says encouragingly. I've heard so many good things about you, Izuku. The way you helped so many people is amazing. Having a quirk or not is irrelevant. It doesn't change the fact that you're a good person. No, Izuku wants to scream. You don't understand. You don't understand at all. I'm not crying because I don't have a quirk, I'm crying because I do have one. And it's the worst quirk I could ever have gotten. It's basically forcing me to be a hero. Dr. Tsubasa clears his throat and suggests that perhaps all this information is a little too much to absorb all at once. He gives them his number and tells them to call him if any symptoms start showing up. Inko nods and does the talking for her listless son, which is a small mercy. The ride home is silent. Later that night, Izuku lies on his bed and stares at the ceiling. He rethinks every moment in his life. 341 cat rescues. 93 times he's driven off either Takeshi, Kyosuke, Riku, or some other bully. 20 times he's saved people from falling objects, including the time he pushes a woman away from a falling girder as he passed by a construction site. 3 times he's caught people as they were falling, or broken their fall. 1 was a suicide attempt. He will never, in his life, regret that instance. Kimi. He curls in on himself, trying to breathe silently through his tears. How much of those had been him? Had been his own genuine longing to simply do a good deed? How many of those had simply been a consequence of his quirk? He thinks, for the first time in a long while, about his late father. The man he swore he would never emulate, the man he swore to forget. He promptly abandons the thought, still too painful for him to face. His mind immediately veers towards Grandpa, but that wound still festers, unhealed. He curses softly and pulls a pillow in, embracing it tightly. Was he doomed to be a hero from the start? Was it his fate? There has never and will never be a more reluctant hero than me, Izuku thinks spitefully, as he screws his eyes shut and prays for sleep to take him away from his turbulent thoughts. Kimi and Yashiro follow him to the same junior high. It's the best school in this area, Yashiro mumbles defensively, while Kimi just stares blankly at Izuku, as if daring him to question her. He doesn't. Meanwhile, Kaken enrolls at a decidedly less prestigious school. Kimi and Yashiro are both baffled by his decision. Izuku knows the reason all too well. Kaken wants a perfect hero career, which means he needs a perfect hero origin story. Beating the odds by graduating from a lowly school and becoming the #1 hero is the kind of egotistical storyline he's come up with and cherished since he was a child. Izuku shakes his head. That is neither here nor there. Thinking about Kaken is a dangerous and endless rabbit hole. He decides to stop calling him Kaken and use Katsuki or even Bakugu instead. He decides to stop calling him anything at all. Free from the other boy's shadow, Izuku thrives in his new school. His new classmates are much more appreciative of his intelligence and don't mind at all when he tells them he's quirkless. Quirks don't matter too much in this school, which is more known for its academic performance. In other words, it's right up Izuku's alley. On the other hand, they also seem to admire him due to his friendship with Kimi. She's blossomed into quite the appealing young lady, and her quirk makes her popular with both boys and girls. Yashiro and Izuku are the envy of every boy in class, who all can't comprehend how someone as stunning as Kimi would willingly hang out with them. Girls tolerate them and give them more than a passing glance, although they don't know what Kimi sees in them either. Izuku lets them wonder. Neither he nor Kimi care what they think, anyway. Yashiro claims he doesn't either, but Izuku knows that deep down he's preening at the attention. Izuku, Yashiro, and Kimi. The school challenges him mentally like no other school has before. He has to work hard to earn his spot at the top of the rankings, and although so far he's managed to maintain the top spot each time, he knows he can't be complacent. This school is an entirely new environment, and quite honestly, he welcomes the change. Except, of course, that his quirk seems to have missed the memo that he's turning over a new leaf. In the first year alone, he racks up a staggering number of 80 more cat rescues, most of them owned by his new classmates or their families. He saves another little girl from a speeding truck, and Kimi treats him to a parfait after that particular deed. He even manages to detect the presence of an armed intruder on the school grounds, and he's able to alert the security guards and the principal before any harm could befall the students. In other words, his quirk is working overtime. He's told exactly 3 people about his quirk: his mom, Yashiro, and Kimi. All 3 had believed him easily, easier than he would have thought. How else could you explain the staggering number of good deeds he's gotten himself into? No one else found themselves in situations like those as often as Izuku did. All 3 were also quick to tell him that his quirk in no way invalidated his deeds, and they would feel terrible his mom, get mad Yashiro, or beat him up Kimi if he allowed himself to feel that way. So he doesn't. He follows his gut whenever it tells him to do something, and Yashiro and Kimi cover for him whenever he suddenly rushes off, going to rescue some unknown person or animal. He never really knows what he's getting until he gets it. He learns to anticipate the telltale twisting in his gut, and with great effort, not to dread it. Kimi gives him a new title. "You're the reluctant hero, Izuku," she tells him. Yashiro snorts. "That's lame," he says, and immediately regrets it when she shoots him a glare. "It's fitting though," he concedes. "What, no more Izunian?" Izuku teases, laughing as Kimi turns red. Yashiro joins in the laughter, having been told the backstory some time prior. What happened to Izunian, Stoplight, and Waterboy? Kimi's hair turns bright red. It matches her face almost perfectly. "Shut up," she says, but there's no force behind it. Chuckling, all 3 of them fall back into a comfortable silence. Time passes, and Izuku thinks he's okay. Of course, things rarely stay okay. In second year, despite his best efforts, Izuku starts to grow jaded. Don't get him wrong, helping people is and has always been important to him. More than their gratitude, the simple thought that he's passed through their lives and made it marginally better never fails to make him glad. It's just, well, he never asked for this. He doesn't linger to hear their thanks. As soon as he's finished helping whoever it is, he leaves. With every cat rescued, the owner barely has time to receive their pet before Izuku's off, walking without so much as a look back. Whenever he saves someone who's in danger, he briefly scolds them or tells them to be more careful. Their thanks fall on purposefully deaf ears, and they start to feel more like lashes against Izuku's back. Despite his mother and his friends' best efforts, Izuku never shakes off the feeling that the only reason he's able to help people is because of his quirk. Without it, Izuku's not sure if he would ever have rescued Emi, or befriended Yashiro, or saved Kimi. Those deafening what-ifs float around in his brain when he tries to go to sleep, and haunt him mercilessly even during the day. He also feels like a hypocrite. All those years of declaring that you don't need a quirk to help people lay heavy on his back and threaten to crush him. Each and every single time he'd said that rewinds over and over in his head, clogging his nostrils and making it hard to breathe. This is the emotional backlash that hasn't set in since that doctor's appointment well over a year ago. This is all the effed up sheet in his head that's been swimming quietly under the surface only to come out and rear its ugly head, and he can't do a single thing about it. All those years of preaching and crowing only to have been a fraud this whole time, there's really no other word for it than effed up. He thinks of the way he used to preach to a certain blonde boy, and isn't that just a whole other ugly can of worms? Logically, Izuku knows it isn't his fault. His quirk does seem to fall into the unobtrusive quirk category, and he couldn't have known from the get-go that his actions were being influenced by his quirk. It was completely logical for him to have assumed that he was quirkless, and for everyone else to assume that as well. It doesn't make him feel any better, but at least he, on a conceptual level, knows that. Yashiro and Kimi are well aware of this train of thought and know that it is something that neither of them will be able to root out. It's too ingrained in him for them to do more than ease it marginally. Instead, they stay quietly and faithfully by his side, deflecting questions about his strange knack of always being in the right place at the right time, and waiting wordlessly for him to walk home with them no matter where he's coming from. They offer their comfort in the place of the gratitude he refuses to accept, and he thinks that he can take it. It's better than the blind thanks. Man, it's only second year, but people are already talking about what high school they want to go to, Yashiro says one day, while they're walking home. He keeps slurping at the dregs of his soda, until Kimi asks him to please, for the love of God, stop making that awful noise. A lot of them are thinking about applying at the general course in UA. It is one of the best schools in Japan, Kimi says. For heroics, anyway. What is their standing in terms of the general department? Izuku strokes his chin thoughtfully, which Kimi always teases him relentlessly for. Definitely in the top 10 when it comes to academics, he says. UA does boast about being the best of the best, so it makes sense that they wouldn't slack off even when it comes to the general department. What if you studied there, Izuku? Kimi suddenly asks. Could you imagine? A general studies student rescuing way more people than the students in heroics. In spite of himself, Izuku has to smile a little. Wouldn't that be a funny sight? Imagine a lowly general studies student like him stealing the limelight from the little heroes in training. Of course, that would go against everything he stands for, so he dismisses the possibility. I don't think they'd take it too well, he says, chuckling lightly. And if I did, they might try to put me in the heroics department, and I'd have to put my foot down on that. Being a hero's too much work anyways, Yashiro groans. You'd think all you have to do is fight the bad guys and win, but then you'd have to do all the paperwork, report to the police, and God forbid you cause too much collateral damage, all your pay'll go to repairs, so you did it all for nothing. And then you'd have to appeal to the masses too, Kimi adds. You can't be too scary or too intimidating, because then the audience wouldn't like you and you won't be as popular. You're basically a celebrity, too. Heroes probably don't get too much privacy unless they make an effort to hide their real-life identity. Here, Yashiro agrees, before launching into a tirade about the questionable health insurance benefits that heroes must not get. Izuku smiles privately. He knows what his friends are trying to do, and he appreciates it. He stops in his tracks when his guts twist, and it's most certainly not because he just downed a whole root beer float. Kimi and Yashiro stop just as abruptly. Now, Kimi asks, and Izuku nods once, tense. We'll go ahead and tell your mother, Yashiro says, and Izuku is so grateful. And don't be late. You invited us over for dinner, and we expect you to be there. He has to shout this last bit as Izuku's feet take him running off. They don't leave until Izuku's out of sight. Ever since he's acknowledged his quirk, he's gotten better at interpreting its signals. Not only does it act as a radar to possibly dangerous situations, it also serves as a kind of compass, giving him subtle prods in the direction he's meant to go. Today, it takes him through the shopping district, whipping past crowds of people rushing to go home and start their evenings. It takes him to a narrow alley, where he spots two other people, one who's decidedly hanging on to the last vestiges of life. His skin starts to crawl. "Hey!" Izuku calls out, forcing his voice to stop trembling. "You guys shouldn't be here." Two pairs of eyes turn to meet his gaze. One of them is glazed over, seeing but not really seeing Izuku. They're bright purple and lined with heavy bags, but Izuku's most pressing concern is how the light seems to be draining quickly from them. The other pair is completely dead, in a totally different sense. They speak of things people are not meant to see, of acts too horrible to name, and they glint in the light not too differently from the blade in their owner's hand. Izuku swallows his fear. His gut tells him to press on. I mean, if you guys don't leave soon, you'll get caught up in the rush hour, and it'll really make for one hell of a commute, he forces out. The criminal eyes him, almost lazily, too much as if he's found another pretty kitten to kill. And besides, the police are setting up checkpoints around here today. Traffic'll be an absolute nightmare. The criminal doesn't give a reaction. Instead, he looks back down on his victim. And won't your parents be worried? Izuku shouts, hoping his voice will attract attention. The bloodied person winces at the sound of his voice, but Izuku's relieved to see any movement at all. Anything that signals that he's still here, that Izuku hasn't failed yet. If you're out this late and you don't come home? At that, the criminal silently faces Izuku again. His beady eyes are partially obscured by dank black hair, but they don't mask the sheer madness in them and the horrifying interest, as if Izuku is a precious lab specimen. He looks away and starts walking towards the opposite end of the alley without a word, and eventually he disappears out of sight. Izuku lets out the tremendous breath he's been holding and pitches forward to stumble onto his knees. That was close. Too close. He can't believe it even worked. What was he thinking? It takes a Herculean effort not to hurl the contents of his stomach. Speaking of which, the twisting in his gut hasn't subsided. But his job isn't done. He pulls himself together into a semblance of calmness and purpose and trudges towards the other person. It's a boy. Izuku feels sick when he realizes they must be around the same age. His body is decorated with deep gashes and lacerations, and he's bleeding out steadily. Izuku doesn't have much time, or room for error. He has to be careful. The boy is thankfully still conscious, and he stares apprehensively at Izuku, who ignores it and gingerly helps him up. He supports the other boy's weight all on his own, wanting to make the trip as light and easy as possible for him. He hears the boy mumble and says, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." "Can't decide if you're a hero or a dumbass," the boy murmurs. Izuku snorts. "I'm definitely not a hero," he says decisively. "Keep your eyes open." The minute they step out into the street, all eyes are on them. The people who do not immediately start walking away crowd him, and he quickly asks for someone to call an ambulance, as well as the police. The boy leans heavily on him, wincing all the while, and Izuku keeps him upright, keeps him safe and grounded and awake. An ambulance arrives promptly, and the paramedics take it over from there. Izuku lets go of the bloodied boy who allows himself to be carted off into the vehicle. He meets Izuku's eyes one more time before the doors close over him, and the only evidence that they ever met is the blood that stained Izuku's clothing. A police officer approaches him and asks him to come with them to the nearby station to give his report on the event. Izuku goes with them willingly, and gives them the simple report he had been passing by, running because he'd forgotten to buy something at the nearby convenience store, when he'd looked into the alley and noticed the two of them. He told them what he'd done to get the criminal to back off, staying within line of sight of other passers-by while also bluffing that police were nearby. The officer interviewing him, a man who introduces himself as Minagawa, regards him with something akin to wonder. "You approached an obviously unstable man and started spouting off about traffic?" he says, amazed. Izuku ducks his head. "I couldn't provoke him. I didn't know what a man like that would do. I thought it would be better if he thought the police were coming so that he'd leave." Minagawa shakes his head. "That was still quite a risk. Still, your thought process is remarkable. If you had left to call for help, who knows what he could have done while you were gone." He smiles kindly at Izuku. "You were very brave today, Midoriya-kun. I'm told that the boy has reached the hospital and is in critical condition, but the doctors are confident that he will survive. And that is all thanks to you and your quick thinking. Izuku stares at his hands. Thankfully, they've stopped shaking some time ago, and the sensation in his gut has receded. Its absence feels like relief, and instinctively he knows that the boy truly will recover. I'm just glad I was able to help, he says, the words almost automatic. And I'm glad he'll be okay. Minagawa simply smiles. He finishes his interrogation and sends someone off to get a jacket for Izuku, so he can cover the bloodstains still on his clothing. He thanks Izuku and gives him a business card with contact information, and asks that he contact the station for any concern. Izuku accepts it and prays he never has to use it. When he finally gets home, the sky is completely dark. The dining room is noisy with conversation, and everyone looks up expectantly when they hear his footsteps. Izuku! Inko cries, lighting up when she sees her son. Then she pauses. Oh dear. That isn't your jacket, is it? Kimi looks him over. You're really pale. Was it bad? Did you have to talk someone out of it? She says hesitantly. Izuku shakes his head. They all know how he gets whenever he has to talk someone into stepping away from the ledge, or putting down the razor. Those are the most emotionally draining. No, if someone was about to get stabbed in an alley, I kind of drove the killer off. Kimi and Yashiro immediately stand up from their seats, while Inko rushes forward. She gently tugs the jacket off his frame and stares, horrified, at the already darkening bloodstains. None of this blood is mine. Izuku quickly clarifies. When the killer left, I helped him up until someone called an ambulance. Then I went to the police station to give a testimonial, and the officer gave me the jacket to wear so that the stains wouldn't show. And, he says quieter, he told me that the boy would survive. Oh, honey, Inko murmurs, before drawing him into an embrace. Izuku almost tells her not to, because he doesn't want to stain her apron, but he knows she wouldn't listen. Slowly, Kimi and Yashiro approach, and it isn't too long before they wrap their arms around the both of them as well. They do this whenever Izuku comes from a particularly tense encounter. They do this when the fear and panic finally sets in, when he can't act calm anymore and can't repress them. Izuku lets the unshed tears finally fall, and he breathes shakily in and out, trying to match the measured breaths they're taking around him. Eventually, as he always does, Izuku calms down. They lean back to give him his space, before Yashiro leans right back into Izuku's hair something terrible. Izuku laughs, and so they finally laugh, and Inko directs him to his room to get changed before they eat dinner. Heck yes, I've missed Mrs. Midoriya's katsudon, Yashiro says eagerly once Inko brings out the servings. Izuku sits between his friends, wearing a bright blue shirt with the word blue written on it. Both Yashiro and Kimi berate him for his awful fashion sense, feeling marginally calmer. He relates to Yashiro, no matter how many times he's eaten his mother's katsudon, he's always looking forward to the next time she serves it again. After dinner, Kimi and Yashiro excuse themselves quietly to call their parents and ask permission to sleep over. Izuku's learned not to protest over this. They refuse to leave him alone after he's gone through something like he did. It's a good thing it's a Friday, anyways. Yashiro borrows some of Izuku's clothes and Inko lends Kimi an oversized shirt and some old flannel pajamas. Izuku pulls out 2 futons and spreads them out in his room, where his mother ushers all 3 of them in with light snacks and some water. In no time at all, the food is eaten, the lights are turned out, and all 3 of them snuggle under their covers, silently looking at the glow-in-the-dark star stickers on Izuku's ceiling. It's futile. Izuku can't sleep. He can't quite get the feeling of absolute terror out from his skin, nor can he banish the sight of the bloodied boy from his mind. In his heart of hearts, he's incredibly grateful he'd been able to step in, and that the boy would survive. That is reward enough. More pressing, though, is the unwavering terror he'd felt while facing that man, knowing that the stakes were all so much higher, and he was gambling with both their lives, not just his own. Can't sleep? Yashiro mumbles out eventually. His voice doesn't sound sleepy. Nope, Izuku admits. We don't even have any homework for me to distract myself with. What was he like? Kimi asks. Who? The killer or the boy? Kimi hums thoughtfully. Both. The killer? He looked insane, Izuku says. His eyes were kind of dead-looking. He was grimy and dressed in all black, and you could just tell he was crazy. That either he was killing out of fun, or he had this messed-up reason for doing so. Scary, Kimi comments. Definitely, Izuku agrees. And the boy? Yashiro prompts. He had purple eyes, Izuku remembers. And he had bags under them even worse than ours. Speak for yourself, Kimi interjects haughtily, lightly stroking her perfect skin. Izuku and Yashiro laugh quietly. They owe their relatively good skin to Kimi's strict hygiene routine, which she's all but forced them to maintain. It's her own way of taking care of them, especially Izuku, who's prone to getting little to no sleep whenever he gets absorbed in studying. I couldn't see much else of him because he had a hoodie on, and, well, I was focused on all the blood, but I remember his eyes very well. He was looking at me as they carried him into the ambulance, Izuku recounts. How did he thank you? Yashiro wonders. Was he even conscious enough to thank you? Izuku snorts. He called me a dumbs, he says almost fondly. Didn't thank me at all. Kimi and Yashiro laugh. He sounds like a real charmer, Kimi says. I wish we could meet him again. Yeah, then he could join the Adopt Izuku Club, Yashiro pipes up. He could be the missing third member, the mom friend, the voice of reason. Who said anything about adopting me? Izuku says incredulously, but his friends go on undeterred. I'm the voice of caution and fun, Yashiro says, counting on his fingers. Kimi is the voice of, general well-being, I guess? And if that guy's the voice of reason, then together we form the Izuku Protection Squad. There's a beat of silence. I can make badges, Kimi offers cautiously. We'd have to find our missing third member though, Yashiro muses. I wonder what hospital they took him to. Izuku laughs, louder than before, clutching his sheets. On the floor, Yashiro and Kimi's faces break into wide smiles at the sound of their friends' laughter. We should get to sleep, Izuku says, once he stops giggling. He looks peacefully up at his starry ceiling, feeling the day's fatigue finally starting to set in. Good night, you guys. Thank you, goes unsaid. Good night. The two of them answer in chorus. Their silent you're welcome lingers. Izuku closes his eyes. Blessedly, he doesn't dream. After the incident, Izuku enrolls in a self-defense class. He figures that the more life-threatening situations he gets into, the more life-threatening they'll actually be. He doesn't know what good his quirk will do him then, so it's better to be safe than sorry. Besides, Izuku enjoys the classes. It's easy to get lost in the motions when the instructor makes them to repeat them over and over until they're second nature. The teacher, a buff woman they're emphatically told to refer to as Shursho, her name is actually Shirori, which Izuku quite likes. Her quirk is minor muscle augmentation. When she hits, it hurts. Some time after, Yashiro enrolls with him. It becomes their thing, so to speak. After school on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and occasionally Saturdays when Yashiro isn't too lazy to go, they head on over to Shursho's dojo for training. With or without Yashiro, Izuku religiously attends training 7 days a week. He's become Shursho's favorite student in a short span of time, probably because he attends every day and he's the only one who's yet to voice any complaints in the midst of training. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, he's improving at a greater rate than he would have without her personal attention. On the other, he's also become her favorite student to practice demonstrations on. And that's how you do a chokehold. Shursho cheerfully concludes, releasing Izuku just before he passes out. He drops to the floor, gasping and greedily inhaling air. The other students look impressed and marginally terrified. They hadn't even been discussing chokeholds. Shursho had simply interrupted the class and told them to watch what she was about to demonstrate. Shursho and Izuku. Yashiro quickly rushes over to pull Izuku up. Yes, that was, excellent, Shursho, he hurriedly says before pulling his friend safely out of the instructor's reach. Shursho beams. Thank you, Yashiro-kun. She turns to the rest of the students. All right, class, that's it for today. Those who are enrolled in the Quirk Enhancement Program will stay behind. Dismissed. As one, the students bow deeply. More than half leave to go to the locker rooms to collect their things. Yashiro groans. Ah man, Izuku grins at him from where Yashiro has set him down on the floor. Hey, you signed up for the program. I'm even offering you moral support. Show a little more enthusiasm. Yashiro glares at him. I'd feel better if you were really here to give me moral support instead of sticking around to observe people's quirks. Izuku's grin grows wider. After the regular self-defense class, the dojo also offers a quirk enhancement class for those who wish to participate. It entails strengthening the base effects of their quirk and teaching them to find defensive and occasionally offensive ways to apply it. A lot of students hoping to enter the heroics department are enrolled in the just barely legal class. Shirsho had to build an extremely fortified gym behind the actual dojo and obtain several licenses before the class was approved. Normally, students who aren't enrolled aren't allowed to stay behind once the quirk class was underway. Izuku, on the other hand, was a special case. For one thing, Shirsho adored him. For another, he was instrumental in understanding the quirks of the students and often helped out with the technicalities. Izunai. A high voice chirps as soon as Yashiro and Izuku enter the gym. The small blur slams into Izuku, who steps back lightly and chuckles. Soon, a chorus of Izunai rises up, and more small children flock to him and threaten to send him tumbling over. Okay, Izuku laughs. The first child, a red-haired girl named Akari, beams toothily at him. She holds her hands up entreatingly and Izuku obliges, lifting her up to his face. You guys are getting so strong. The children clamor for his attention, each of them attempting to show off their quirks in turn. Shirsho has recently put Izuku in charge of the children group, which handles students younger than 8 years old. Although he's only been the assistant for 2 weeks, the children have latched onto him. Maybe it has something to do with his reassuring, quiet manner, and the way he compliments them so sincerely on their quirks and helps them to get better. Yashiro laughs at the display. It seems that Izuku will never be able to escape throngs of grateful children. He pats Izuku on the shoulder and moves off to join the advanced classes. See you in a bit, Izuku, he says as he leaves. Yeah, Izuku says, setting Akari down. She makes a noise of discontent, but settles for latching around his waist. All right, you guys, let's get started. Since most of these kids are already enrolled in some type of martial art or the other, Izuku leads them easily through a round of stretching. Next, he sets them to their individualized quirk strengthening activity. Akari, how long can you keep your hair lit now? Izuku asks. The girl closes her fists tightly and grits her teeth. Her hair starts to rise up and slowly turns into bright red flame. Her quirk, Candlelight, allows her to turn her hair into flame and control it. The flame grows stronger the longer her hair is. At the moment, it's waist length and about as hot as a campfire. 1 minute, Akari says, not without some effort. That's amazing, Izuku says, brows knitting in concentration. When she started, Akari could only hold her flame for bouts of 10 and 20 seconds before her hair went back to normal. Why don't we try seeing if you can regulate the temperature? Maybe if you make the flame less hot, you could keep it up longer. Akari nods in understanding, but she lets out a shaky breath as the fire is extinguished and her hair returns to normal. Okay, I'll try again. Good. He moves on to the next kid, a boy named Yudo. How far can you reach your arms now, Yudo? Mom measured me yesterday and I could stretch my arms out about 5 meters now. Yudo says proudly. Watch. Scrunching his face in concentration, Yuto extends his arms forward, palms facing outward. He takes a deep breath, and suddenly his arms stretch, shooting out. They stop abruptly about quite a distance away, which Izuku supposes is 5 meters. See? Yuto says, shaking with exertion, but he's smiling brightly at Izuku. He holds the length for a few seconds, before sagging and drawing his arms into about 3 meters. But it's hard for me to keep it up. Okay, Izuku says. He brings Yudo over to the part of the gym specifically dedicated to long jump. Today we'll work on increasing your top range. That should make it easier for you to maintain 5 if you're able to reach longer. He points at the markers on the ground. Keep shooting your arms out to maximum and then quickly draw them back in. Take a small pause and then do it again. Today, I want you to get past 5 meters, even if you can't maintain it yet. Sound good? Yuto nods determinedly. Okay, Aizuan. Good man, Izuku says and leaves him to it. The rest of the session goes much like this. Once the kids are absorbed in each of their activities, Izuku feels confident enough to leave them for a short while to go over to the advanced classes. Unfortunately, he forgot to bring his notebook with him today, so he watches extra attentively in order to commit the students' movements to memory for later documentation. Yashiro isn't in the main gym, but in a special room meant for students with elemental-based quirks. He's come a long way from when he was a child. Back then, he struggled with manipulating even a pitcher's worth of water. But just last week, he excitedly called Izuku over to the river in the woods and demonstrated his strengthened quirk. He turned a good chunk of the river, a section easily 15 meters long and about a meter deep, first into ice, then into water vapor, before returning it into water. Back then, Yashiro couldn't shift ice directly into water vapor and vice versa. He had to turn it into liquid before changing it. Now, he could turn it into whatever phase he wishes, and much faster too. Izuku is more than a little proud. Eventually, the class ends and the students bow deeply, as is customary in the dojo, as soon as they are dismissed. As always, Izuku is given his usual swarm of hugs from the little kids before they rush off to go home. He allows their affection and watches fondly as they walk away, talking excitedly about their exercises. Shirsho thanks him and pats him painfully on the back. Thanks again for helping out, Izuku. Those kids enjoy your classes so much, maybe you should work here once you graduate. She lets out a booming laugh, which hits him almost as much as her pats had. Izuku laughs politely and bows instead of answering her suggestion. It's a viable option, but still only an option. It's the best option so far, to be sure, but he'll think about it. Izuku stands contentedly outside of the dojo after Shirsho has left and reminded him to lock up, waiting for Yashiro. Knowing his friend, he'll be hungry and insist on stopping by the okonomiyaki shop on the way home. Izuku watches idly as the twilight set in. Quirk enhancement, huh? He wonders morbidly what it might be like if his quirk got stronger. He decides he doesn't want to know. I don't know really yet, Izuku answers blandly. Their counselor, Mrs. Honda, looks at him with a mixture of fondness and exasperation. Midoriya-kun, with your grades, I'm confident that you could get into any high school in Japan. She gestures to his academic records, an impressive string of unbroken first rankings. Haven't you given it any thought at all? Truthfully, Izuku has been thinking a lot about it. Objectively, he knows he doesn't have too much passion to back up his impressive intelligence. However, he thinks that would allow him to enter any school and excel, regardless of whether he enjoyed it there or not. He just hasn't decided exactly where he'd like to go, and what he'd like to do. I've thought a bit about it, he says apologetically. And my mother asks me a lot about it as well. If nothing else, I'll send off applications to the usual top schools, and I'll decide what to do from there. Don't you have anything you're passionate about? Mrs. Honda asks. Many high schools are offering specialized courses now. Izuku shakes his head. Not really. Sorry. What about teaching or becoming an instructor? My niece quite enjoys your classes. You have a real knack for it, Mrs. Honda suggests. It's something I do in my free time, and only to help out Shirsho, Miss Shirori. I don't really know if I want to pursue it as a career, Izuku says. It's true. He enjoys teaching the kids and getting to see all the different quirks of the other students, but he still doesn't quite know. Mrs. Honda sighs and leans back. Well, you're still in second year. I suppose you still have time. However, you really should start thinking seriously about this. Your friends have already submitted concrete plans for high school. Izuku knows this. Kimi is applying to a prestigious all-girl high school, while Yashiro plans to apply to the general course in UA. His older brother is a second year there, and he's confident that Yashiro could easily pass and excel there. I hope you're not limiting yourself on purpose, Midoriya-kun, Mrs. Honda says. You of all people should know that being quirkless is not something that should hold people back. Izuku internally does the equivalent of rolling his eyes and groaning. Outwardly he simply nods. I know that, he says. It's just that there's so many things I could apply myself to that it's difficult for me to choose. So you say, Mrs. Honda sighs? You just haven't found one that really excites or motivates you. Izuku does not deny this and instead nods politely. Well, when I see you here the next term, you had better have a satisfactory answer for me, Mrs. Honda chides him. I won't accept I don't know by then, do you hear me? I understand, Mrs. Honda, Izuku says, and he bows respectfully before leaving her office. Outside, Kimi and Yashiro are waiting. How'd it go? Yashiro asks at the same time that Kimi asks, what nonsense did you feed her this time? Izuku laughs. I didn't feed her nonsense, just the truth. I don't know where I want to study yet, nor what I want to do. Just enroll with me at UA. Yashiro suggests pleadingly as they walk back to their classroom. That way, I won't be too out of place. I hardly think you'd be out of place in the general course, Izuku says. Besides, that means Kimi's going to be the only one not joining us. Kimi snorts. As if I need you two to do well in high school. It's pretty much the other way around. Besides, do you think I couldn't make it into UA if I really wanted to? Not the hero course, though, stoplight, Izuku mutters. Yashiro hears and snickers. Kimi hears and pinches the both of them in their sides, making them yelp. Kimi's pinches have the unfortunate tendency to tickle and hurt. Back in the classroom, only a few of their classmates linger. Most have already gone home after the consultation with Mrs. Honda. Izuku and the others collect their things, bidding their classmates goodbye for the day. As they leave the campus, Yashiro says, I gotta stop by the convenience store to get some stuff for my brother. You guys coming? I'll go, Izuku says. I feel like getting ice cream anyways. Kimi agrees to go as well. Only if you don't prompt anything weird, she says. They laugh. It isn't like he can control it, anyway. At the convenience store, they part ways as soon as they enter. Yashiro rushes off to collect his needed items, while Kimi wanders away to look at magazines. Izuku meanders over to the freezer, hoping that they had the vanilla special he'd enjoyed at this outlet before. On the way, he bumps into someone. Their basket clatters to the ground, but thankfully nothing spills. Oh, I'm sorry, Izuku says quickly, bending down to pick up the basket before the person could do it themselves. Here you go, he says, straightening up to hand it over. He startles slightly at the sight of the person. Thank you, young man. The person is tall, with a shock of spiky blonde hair. He's tall, thin and gaunt-looking, almost emaciated, and his eyes are filmy blue irises set in sunken sockets. Even so, there's an undeniable air of kindness around him, softening the impact of his appearance and even making him pleasant to watch. He takes the basket, then dissolves into a coughing fit. Izuku is alarmed. Are you okay, sir? He asks, concern spiking when he sees blood on the fist the man uses to cover his mouth. Hang on, I've got tissues in my bag, please use them. You're very kind. The man manages to get out in the midst of coughing, and gratefully takes the offered tissues. Izuku watches him carefully, anticipating another bout of coughing. I'm fine, young man, the man insists, seeing the worry in Izuku's eyes. It's nothing that I haven't gotten used to. Thank you for your assistance, though. It's nothing, Izuku begins, but immediately stops when the telltale twist in his gut suddenly lurches, cutting him off. His first thought is, now? His second is, Kimi told me not to get in trouble. His third, and last before he starts running off, is, it's close. The man seems startled. At the sudden way that Izuku runs off, walking cautiously after him to see what has gotten the attention of this young boy. Izuku hopes and prays that Kimi and Yashiro are somewhere near the back of the store, and that this encounter wouldn't be anything too dangerous. Izuku approaches the counter of the store. A young woman stands at the cashier, idly scrolling through the screen of her phone. Izuku looks around hurriedly, trying to spot where the danger might come from. A fire? A faulty wire? What's wrong, young man? The gaunt man approaches him slowly, then turns his head to follow Izuku's swiveling head. Izuku himself finally sees it, a young man in a black hoodie, his hands in his pockets. Izuku watches discreetly as he idly approaches the cashier, and then he sees it, in his hand is a knife. Izuku moves faster than the blonde man can begin to speak. The cashier barely has time to look up before Izuku pins the boy to the counter, and then deftly twists his hand to make him drop the knife. "Call the police," Izuku says quickly, putting weight carefully on the boy as he begins to struggle. He implores the cashier with his eyes to do it fast. There's not telling what this would-be attacker's quirk is. The cashier quickly comes to her senses and presses a button behind the counter. "It alerts the police," she says, then moves cautiously away from Izuku and the boy. Izuku does not let his guard down, watching carefully for any telltale signs of the boy's quirk emerging. Behind him, he hears two familiar footsteps rushing over. "Izuku!" Kimi calls as Yashiro shouts, "Are you okay?" "Yashiro!" Izuku quickly interrupts. "Can you make some ice to hold this guy down?" "On it." Yashiro quickly gathers some of the humid air and turns them into solid shackles of ice around the man's hands and ankles. The air becomes a little lighter. Thick and sturdy, they do not break as the man continues to struggle. "Thanks," Izuku says, but he doesn't let off the man. He hears something clatter and the sound of Kimi yelling, "Izuku! Watch out!" And he immediately moves back as the knife on the floor flies sharply back into the hand of the man, narrowly avoiding slashing his leg. Izuku watches cautiously to see if the man tries to pull anything else to him, but it seems he can't maneuver his arms and hands enough to try. Izuku uses his arm to knock the knife out of his hand once again, hitting the blunt edge, then resumes his position holding the man down. "Yashiro, try and cover the knife to keep it from going back to him," Izuku instructs. I don't know if his quirk lets him summon small objects, or just knives, or even control them completely. We're better off keeping out of his reach until the police arrive. The man under him grunts angrily, muttering incomprehensibly. Yashiro deftly takes a shopping basket and covers the knife with it, putting his foot on top of it to keep it from moving. The man's hands twist as much as they can with the ice keeping his wrists in place, but he does nothing more until the police arrive to take him away. Izuku leans away from the man and watches the two officers who come inside take him away. Yashiro offers to evaporate the ice around the man's limbs, but the officer holding the man stops them. "You did good. I think we can handle taking the ice off once he's detained." Yashiro smiles shyly. "Oh, I only made the ice. Izuku's the one who held him down and kept him from doing anything." "Izuku?" one of the officer repeats, and he looks around and sees the boy in question. His eyes widen in recognition. "Oh, I know you. You're that kid who stopped that stabbing incident 2 months ago." He beams. "What's with you and rescuing people, huh?" Izuku laughs sheepishly. "If only you knew. I guess I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I'm glad I could help again." "Hey, thanks for stepping in, kid," says the officer brightly. "Don't get into a habit of getting into trouble though, you hear?" "Loud and clear," Izuku affirms, wincing. He watches as the police lead the man away and finally lets out a sigh of relief. Kimi and Yashiro draw near, disapproval on the former's face. "Really? Your first instinct was to pin that man to the counter?" she sighs, placing her hands on her hips. Yashiro, meanwhile, is beaming. "That was awesome, Izuku," he exclaims. "That guy didn't know what hit him. You just went bam." He punches the air, and then boom. Shirsho's going to be so excited when she hears this. Kimi side-eyes him long enough for Yashiro to notice and contain himself. But, what she said. Dangerous. Izuku chuckles, then feels a light hand rest on his shoulder. It's the thin man. There's something intense in the way his blue eyes survey him, even as his whole aura is completely waylaid by the domestic way he carries a basket full of groceries. The sheer intensity is oddly familiar. "That was incredibly heroic, young man," he says seriously. "No. Izuku, was it?" "Ah, yes," Izuku says, too off balance to try and refute the H word. Yes, I'm Midoriya Izuku. Well, you can call me Yagi." "Yagi Tashinori," says the man. He withdraws his hand. "That was an amazing thing you just did, young Midoriya. Reckless but brave. You're lucky you came out unscathed. What made you do it?" "I saw the situation," Izuku begins, and used to explaining his actions. Normally, people let him go with thanks he doesn't want and nothing more. And understood that I had the capacity to help. So I did. That's all really. I'm lucky he didn't try anything more with the knife. Yagi regards him seriously. Are you planning on becoming a pro hero, young Midoriya? He finally asks, with no preamble whatsoever. Behind Izuku, Kimi and Yashiro flinch at the question. Toshinori notices them and meets their eyes, but they hastily look away. Izuku is momentarily silent, but then he looks up and smiles. No, sir. I don't want to go into heroics. Please call me Yagi. And why not? The man asks curiously. Normally, Izuku would brush off these encounters either by acting dismissive or saying he doesn't want to talk about it. But there's something about Yagi and the way he asks that question that makes Izuku feel the need to explain himself, to justify himself. Izuku, Kimi interjects, clearly ready to intervene, but Izuku answers. Because I'm quirkless, Yagi-san. And I don't think you can become a full-fledged pro hero without a useful quirk. It's reckless and irresponsible. Yagi regards him silently, peering down at him with serious blue eyes. Izuku meets his gaze resolutely and silently communicates that no, he doesn't want to be hero. Yes, Yagi says, his expression unreadable. I suppose so. Contrary to what Izuku believed and hoped for, actually, that was not the last time he would encounter Toshinori Yagi. In fact, now that he has met the man, he runs into him far more often than he would have thought. They have the typical run-ins at convenience stores, bookstores, and other public places. Most often than not, Izuku pretends he doesn't see the man and only greets him if they happen to interact directly. However, they meet most often when they're both jogging in the morning, and Izuku can't really find a polite way to shake the man off then. It's not that he doesn't like the man named Toshinori Yagi. No, the man himself is kind, patient, not to mention an absolute beast at running despite his obvious condition. He even indulges Izuku's rambling on quirks and quirk theory, often coming up with his own contributions when the conversation turns to the quirks of heroes. Over their accumulating time together, Izuku learns to get accustomed to Yagi's occasional coughing fits and starts to carry a pack of tissues and wipes with him at all times in case he encounters the man. In turn, Yagi is no longer fazed when Izuku drops their current conversation at the slightest excuse to segue into quirk talk. In short, he likes Yagi's company. Quite a lot, actually. The only problem is that the more time Yagi spends with Izuku, the more exposed he is to the effects of Izuku's quirk. Izuku's quirk seems to have graduated from easy cat rescues, although he still gets some from time to time. Essie, a kitten from Emmy's litter, and the spitting image of her has taken over her mother's job as cat climber number 1. Instead, it pushes him more and more into crucial situations, often necessitating his intervention between a fight, a robbery, or a theft. Thankfully, there hasn't been a homicide attempt since that one time, but Izuku wouldn't put it past his quirk to get him into one soon. While his more serious quirk incidents aren't too frequent, they seem to jump into overdrive whenever Yagi is around. The first time they had jogged together, Yagi barely had any time to try and keep up before Izuku was suddenly sprinting ahead, just barely making it in time to pull an elderly woman out of the path of a speeding motorcycle. Privately, Izuku feels that his quirk is running out of imagination. Speeding car, speeding truck, speeding motorcycle? What was next? The train? Izuku takes it back. He'd rather not tempt fate. Each time, Yagi observes as he intervenes and inevitably attempts to comfort or console the victims involved long enough for them to calm down. The police officers who come and apprehend the criminals he stops tip their hat off to him in gratitude, laughing in amazement every time they see that once again, Izuku's saved the day. But it's really not helping his whole I'm not a hero case. Yagi doesn't really say anything per se, because Izuku's made it clear from the get-go that he's not interested in becoming a pro hero. During one of their longer runs, Izuku even went so far as to explain the general disdain he has for the hero industry, apart from his supposedly not having a quirk. Yagi takes it all in with no discernible reaction, but he did seem rather conflicted when Izuku had told him this. Nevertheless, he respects Izuku's opinion on this. Izuku doesn't really know what to tell him. Sure, Yagi never said anything about that first incident at the convenience store. But for any normal person unknowing of Izuku's situation, it was really FING weird. Today, Yagi seems to be just barely holding his tongue as Izuku stops a robbery. They just so happened to be standing outside the bakery as the incident was having, and Izuku had taken one look inside the windows before apologetically saying, "Just a minute, Yagi-san," and practically rushing in. Once the crook is apprehended, Izuku exits the establishment to find Yagi waiting coolly outside, the same uncomfortable intensity in his eyes. "Yagi-san? I'm, sorry for rushing in without warning like that," Izuku says uncertainly, unsure of what the emotions running through Yagi's eyes mean. Yagi doesn't reply immediately, only stares at him for an uncomfortable amount of time. Eventually, he smiles kindly and says, "Not to worry, young Midoriya. Shall we continue our run?" Their conversation settles easily into the topic of quirks, and naturally gravitates towards heroes. "I hear there's been a spike in All Might sightings around this area," Izuku says, huffing. "Do you know anything about that?" Really?" Yagi muses. When he runs, his coughing fits decrease in frequency and intensity. He seems almost healthy as his legs pound the pavement. "I suppose he's gotten more active in this area. I don't see why he needs to, though," he smiles at Izuku. "Considering you're around." Izuku flushes with color and turns away, trying his best not to let his mouth sink into a pout. "Don't say unnecessary things, Yagi-san," he says, embarrassed. "Or perhaps he's around in preparation for the upcoming Hero Expo," Yagi suggests. "Ah, that one," Izuku says. A Hero Expo is being organized in the next city over. Top heroes from all over Japan would be coming to attend, and many would be participating in a series of panels and seminars for their fans as well as aspiring young heroes. There would be a ton of hero memorabilia to be displayed as well, making the expo a must-see for every hero fan. Or, in Izuku's case, Quirk superfan. "Are you going, Yagi-san?" "It's after the end of the term, so I'm definitely going," Izuku says. "I hope they have Quirk demonstrations. It'll be a good chance to observe them without the dangers of being close to fight." "Yes, I'll be attending," Yagi says idly. "Perhaps we can even go together. I'm old friends with some of the pro heroes, so I could probably introduce you if you'd like." "Really?" Izuku gasps, slowing to a stop. Yagi pauses beside him as well. "You would do that?" "Of course," Yagi says. "Someone like you definitely deserves to be up there with the heroes." Time passes quickly. Izuku gets into even more shenanigans with or without Yagi. He gets through. Term ends. And now, Izuku, 1 hour before the expo, is rushing towards Kimi's house with a battery-powered blow-dryer, cursing his bad luck for even owning one. To be fair, Kimi has a legitimate reason for needing it. She's about to have her first audition at a modeling agency, and against all odds, her own blow-dryer had broken down just the night before. There had been no time to procure a new one, and Kimi knew that Inko owns one, and so, well, here he is. Blimey, Izuku thinks, is this still even part of my quirk? Am I rescuing Kimi from a bad hair day? Izuku stops momentarily just a block away from Kimi's house. Logically he knows he has to hurry, but he'd messed up his stretching routine this morning and now his legs were killing him. What the hell? He bends over to catch his breath, the evil contraption still in his hand. That's when he feels it. His quirk, going into overdrive. And there's no time to react before something thick and heavy swallows him whole and blocks out the entire world. Young Midoriya is running a little late, Toshinori thinks. The expo starts in about an hour, and he'd told the boy to come early in order to enter the expo discreetly with him. He's still in his lanky form, but he's wearing his costume. He's wearing his costume as All Might, symbol of peace, aka the most exhausted being in the universe. He should probably also add desperately looking for a successor to his titles. Today is the day he plans to tell Izuku the truth. The truth about who he is, the truth about his power, and the fact that he too, like young Midoriya himself, had once been quirkless. That there is a way for him to be a hero, to become the hero he is born to be and the hero Japan, no, the world needs. He doesn't exactly know how to overcome Izuku's apparent dislike of the hero industry itself, but let it not be said that All Might doesn't know how to improvise on the spot. The truth is, Toshinori sees so much of himself in the kid. No, he sees himself and more. The kid is everything he had been and better. There's so much raw potential in him, an almost endless potential to shape the world and make it a better place, if only he's given the way to do so. Toshinori knows he has a way. And he knows it might be his duty to give it to Izuku, to allow him to rise up for himself. He only hopes he can be persuasive enough. All of Izuku's senses are smothered by the dark, viscous liquid trying to force itself into him. Luckily, he'd had the foresight to immediately clamp his mouth shut, but now it's trying to work its way into his nostrils. "Open up," it hisses menacingly. Izuku closes his eyes tightly, heart hammering and lungs aching as he tries to find a way out. "It'll only hurt a bit if you make this easy." So this wasn't some random goopy encounter. This was someone with a quirk. Most likely a quirk that affected their whole body and kept them in this state most of the time. If they were trying to enter Izuku's body, maybe they were trying to take over. "My old body got destroyed," the goo whispers, confirming his theory. "You'll give me yours, won't you?" Izuku shakes his head, even knowing that it's futile. He struggles and struggles, but the slime wraps tighter around him, threatening to crush the life out of him. This is bad. At this rate, he'll eventually be forced to open his mouth or inhale deeply, and that'll be the end. Belatedly, he curses his quirk. "You effed up," he tells it, speaking to some non-distinct personification of the force that's brought him to this. "I can't handle this. You effed up." Slowly, arduously, Izuku tries to move his limbs. His legs are basically stuck, and his arms only move a little, the right one even less because of the blow-dryer still in his hand. Izuku's heart leaps. I'm so dumb. Slowly, with a shaking finger, he presses the button that turns it up all the way to 100%. Grah! The slime screams and recoils, enough that Izuku's face and arm is freed. Izuku immediately gasps in a lungful of air, then shuts his mouth in case the villain gets any ideas. With his now mobile right arm, he swings the blow-dryer at the villain, trying to cover as much of them as possible. The villain screams and writhes, and they pull further away from Izuku. He spots two eyeballs floating around in the slime, and isn't that a pretty sight, and aims for them, and that is the final prompting the slime monster needs before slinking away and pouring into the nearest drainage. Izuku collapses to his knees, chest heaving. He takes several moments to simply recover, willing himself to come down from the adrenaline of almost dying. What the hell, it was only 9:30 in the morning. In the midst of his shuddering breaths, he registers the time. 9:30. Izuku shouts out loud, getting shakily onto his feet. Kimi. No, the expo. No, Kimi's audition. No, Yagi was waiting for him. With heroes. Izuku sprints the rest of the way to Kimi's house, preparing a lecture on maintaining electronics and a short, 5-sentence version of his most recent near-death experience, in which said electronic just basically saved his life. Katsuki walks into the expo, eyes narrowed practically into slits. None of the usual losers who followed him around at school are with him today, mostly because he'd threatened to explode them into the next century if they so much as tried to ruin his image while he was at the expo. Course, the expo was full of FING nerds anyway. Shitty hero wannabes and stupid geeks who spent their time fawning over heroes and their quirks. He figures he'd get used to it early on, considering he'd be the one they'd be fawning over in the near future if he has any say about it. Mom, look! A small child rushes past him, almost bumping into him. He considers picking on her but wisely decides not to, as her mother passes by shortly thereafter. The girl has long red hair and immediately rushes towards the statue of Torchwick, the incense hero. It's Torchwick. She's so cool, she gushes. You really like Torchwick, huh, Akari? Her mom says brightly, picking her daughter up. Katsuki scoffs. Torchwick's FING weak. Plus she was, one of a bajillion FING fire-themed heroes? Boring. He makes to walk off when the girl's next words stop him dead in his tracks. Izuku says if I keep practicing, I'll be as cool as her. Maybe cooler. she exclaims. Her mother laughs encouragingly at her words, but they couldn't be less funny to Katsuki. There were tons of Izukus in Japan, weren't there? Thoughts of the DMN nerd pop unbidden into his mind. There's only one Izuku he knows, anyway. He hasn't seen him in what? 2 years? He'd moved to a dormitory closer to his shitty school, and while it was less than ideal, he'd soldiered through it. He wondered, a little apprehensively, if the nerd would be here today. Of course he would, Katsuki thinks. Little Sheet hates heroes, but shove a Quirk in front of him and he'll come drooling like a dog. Well, he could always tell him to pieces off if they ever encountered each other. Besides, in this Big Butt Expo, what were the chances they'd even pass each other? Young Midoriya is really late. There are only 5 minutes left before the start of the expo, and once it starts, Toshinori won't be able to talk to him before assuming his hero form. And assuming that he uses up all his time today, won't be able to prove his declarations. This is bad. Surely Izuku hasn't gotten into another encounter today, has he? Of course he has. This is Izuku he's talking about. Toshinori has never met a person so prone to getting into incredible situations since, well, himself. But there's something in the purely selfless way that Izuku moves, the way he seems to brush off thanks as if it embarrasses him, and the way he always treats it as nothing, as if anyone could do what he does. The world needs someone like him. For the world, Toshinori must convince Izuku to accept his destiny. He's just thinking on possible ways he can convince Izuku, possibly a lengthy PowerPoint, if he could get someone to make it for him when he hears commotion and screaming outside of the expo venue. Like instinct, he expands into his hero form and rushes out. Civilians everywhere are running screaming from the scene, while various pro-heroes surround it, seemingly frozen. All Might follows their gaze and finds a horrific scene. A boy, probably in middle school, is bent over in midair, suspended and surrounded by a dark, viscous goo. From what he can see, it's trying to force its way into the boy's body, trying to enter through his mouth, nostrils, and even ears. The boy is struggling, but not for much longer. The slime has enveloped his whole body, and if he doesn't die from whatever the villain is doing to him, then the suffocation will do it. It's all right now, the words fall from All Might's lips even as he crouches down in preparation to leap into action. Around him, the pro-heroes stand frozen, unable or unwilling to assist. All Might lurches forward but, before he finishes his sentence, before he reaches the boy, before the boy cries out, Izuku is there. No, 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 no. Izuku chants frantically in his brain, even as his feet carry him faster than he would have thought possible to the location his gut is pointing to. He passes by civilians running in the other direction, and what he wouldn't have given in that moment to simply be one of them. It's not this, Izuku pleads. Please don't be taking me to a villain attack. Let this be a theft. A petty robbery. I'll save 50 kids from speeding trucks if I have to. But his quirk takes him unceasingly to the center of the action, the very scene that everybody is running from. He slows down to a stop just outside the sparse ring of pro-heroes surrounding the scene. Excuse me, he shouts, shoving his way in between two heroes, just barely missing hitting the spikes jutting out of their costumes. He ignores shouts of, "Hey kid, it's dangerous," and, "Is that a kid?" A civilian, as his jaw drops in horror at the sight he sees. It's the slime monster again, only this time it's got someone else. Izuku makes eye contact with the person trapped within its confines and his blood freezes and boils over all at the same time. If it had been anybody else at any other time, if it had just been anything else, he could have swallowed his pride and instead turned to one of the heroes to ask them to help. If it hadn't been Kaken, if he hadn't looked into Izuku's eyes, if he hadn't seemed so terrified, then maybe Izuku wouldn't be where he is now, shoes pounding on gravel as he ignores the calls of the heroes and runs for all he's worth towards his childhood friend. Kaken, he screams. The slime monster's eyes reconvene together in front of him, and it seems to recoil slightly at the sight of him. You, it hisses, barely heard over all the noise around them, but Izuku's close enough now to hear everything. He doesn't even have the blow dryer now, he's practically helpless. Kaken, on the other hand. Kaken! Izuku yells. Even after 2 years of radio silence, The name sits easy and familiar on his tongue. Kaken, can you hear me? A sort of muffled screaming emerges from within the slime, so Izuku grits his teeth and claws away at the goo enveloping Kaken's face. The slime monster hisses, trying to creep up Izuku's wrists and arms, but Izuku shakes it off even as he slowly uncovers Kaken's face. Kaken, you have to use your quirk. Izuku instructs. He's freed the other boy's eyes and nostrils, and he's looking up at him with the same hunted, wide-eyed look in his eyes. He's terrified. He can't think straight. Kaken, it's weak to heat. If you explode it, you can run it off. Kaken's face contorts with pain and effort, and beneath him, under all the struggling, Izuku feels the telltale heat indicating that he's using his quirk. The slime villain shudders and groans, but it does not let up on Kaken, even beginning to coat Izuku's arms with itself. Izuku doesn't know if it can take over both of them, but he's firmly decided on not wanting to find out. Instead, Izuku yanks his arms out of the slime as hard as he can and begins to rip at the goo covering Kaken's hands. He winces when he starts to feel the explosions stinging his hand the more slime he pulls away. Kaken sees this and momentarily stops using his quirk, but Izuku turns fiercely to meet his eyes. No. Keep going, Kaken. I'm fine. If you don't use your quirk, then we're both going to die. He's cut off as the slime sneaks up to cover his face, pushing itself into his vulnerable mouth. Through watering eyes, he sees Kaken's own eyes widen. As the slime enters deeper and deeper, filling his nostrils and throat with itself, Izuku yanks at the slime on Kaken's hands one more time and blindly reaches out, grasping Kaken's hands in his own as his vision darkens. If this is the end, he thinks it's somehow fitting that he'll die because of his quirk, the quirk with which he saved so many and yet ultimately couldn't save him. In fact, maybe he'll see Grandpa again. As he feels his consciousness drifting away, his last coherent thought is, I hope nobody says that I died a hero. And that's when he feels the explosions. Kaken uses not only his hands but his feet as well and literally blows the slime monster into pieces. The slime in Izuku's airways are expelled almost immediately, giving him free rein to scream his lungs out at the stinging burns suddenly covering his palms. He lets go of Kaken, but this unfortunately causes him to fall to the ground, now lacking the support of the slime villain to hold him up. He falls on his back, knocking the air out of him, tears falling freely from his eyes as his hands scream with excruciating pain each time he tries to move them. Vaguely, he hears Kaken yelling bloody murder and the sound of more explosions. He closes his eyes and sees lights dancing around behind his eyelids. His palms are burning. He's tired. So tired. He barely moves when the area is racked by a deafening boom. The entire area falls silent. Almost. Izuku registers the sound of Kaken still cursing, weaker, but definitely going strong. Blearily, he struggles to open his eyes and gingerly leans up, supporting himself with his elbows and nearly falling when he accidentally clenches his hands in the movement. He sees Kaken, hunched over, but standing. He's breathing heavily through his mouth, and he's barely keeping himself from toppling over. Around him, bits of the slime villain are spread out, vaguely alive but too torn apart to reform. He couldn't possibly have done that himself, could he? A large hand slowly braces Izuku's back and gently pushes him into an upright sitting position. He turns around and looks up to see who it is. He does not expect to see the number one hero, All Might. Let alone All Might with a sorrowful expression on his face. That's who blew the monster apart. All Might, Izuku croaks. His throat is dry and painful from the slime, not to mention all the screaming he's done today. Sure, All Might says gently. His rough face is hooded in shadow, and the sadness evident on it does not suit him at all. Izuku feels like crying looking at the hero's face like that. It's all right now, young man. You're safe. Izuku tries to get out, before coughing violently onto the side. All Might supports him through it. When he recovers, turns his face forward, searching. Kaken. Is he okay? All Might follows his gaze. Kaken has regained his stance and is now looking around. The part of the sleeves near his wrists have been burned off. So have the soles of his shoes. His eyes finally land on Izuku and All Might, and at first his expression battles between shock and disbelief. Eventually he snaps out of it and limps towards the two of them, impeded slightly by his bare feet. "All Might?" he rasps, looking like he can't quite believe it. Then he looks at Izuku, and his eyes naturally fall on the hands he's trying very hard not to move. "Sheet. Your hands. You were effing holding on and I..." Izuku shakes his head, cutting him off. "No. I told you to do it, Kaken. We both would have died if you didn't use your quirk." Strange how, even after 2 years of separation, there's still inevitably Kaken and Deku. Izuku looks at him and thinks not much has changed, in the way he talks, walks, and carries himself. In the way he fights. Even the way he calls him Deku lacks any added aggression. But he's cut off once again, this time by the sound of sirens wailing in the background. The sounds of police cars and ambulances intermingle in the distance. Kaken and All Might turn to see the various vehicles approaching them. Someone else draws up to them. Izuku looks around as a huge shadow falls over him, and he recognizes the large figure of Boulder, the mountain hero. He looks sheepish, almost shamed. The police and paramedics are coming, he informs them, as if they hadn't heard the sirens. As they should, All Might says, seeing as 2 civilian children have just been injured. Boulder winces. He steps aside as All Might rises slowly and lifts Izuku gingerly into his arms, cradling him tenderly like he's something precious. "Can you walk?" he asks Katsuki. He nods curtly, eyes still focused on the boy in the hero's arms. All Might starts walking towards the waiting ambulance. Izuku feels himself being lulled into calmness by the steady strides he's taking. His hands still hurt something awful, but he knows they'll heal. "Might," he whispers, throat itchy. "What is it, my boy?" asks the hero. "Who else?" he coughs. "Who else is hurt?" All Might frowns. "No one else was injured besides the 2 of you, my boy. And your friend seems to be all right, just some minor injuries that can easily be treated. You got off the worst, young man." Izuku stares into space. "Let's see." All Might reaches an ambulance, where a team of paramedics is anxiously awaiting him. He has burns on his palms, he informs them as he gently lays Izuku down on the stretcher. "And who know how many other injuries. Please, take care of him." "We understand, All Might," says a stern-looking man, who's obviously the head of the team. He looks at Izuku's palms, and his eyes soften in sympathy. "We'll take care of him. I'm riding in the ambulance too," Katsuki cuts in bluntly. "I'm effing injured if you haven't noticed, and someone has to keep an eye on the shitty nerd." The paramedic looks at him, ready to refuse, but All Might intervenes before he can do so. "Please," he says. "They've been through a terrible ordeal." The man hesitates, but eventually lets it go. "Be careful inside, boy," he says to Katsuki, as the others load Izuku inside. Kaken glares. "What do you take me for, a 5-year-old?" he says, but he has the good sense not to say it louder than a whisper. Izuku keeps his eyes on All Might as he's lifted inside the ambulance. The hero's face is knitted with concern, and something else, something that looks conflicted. It's so familiar. Izuku can't place where he's seen it before. All Might holds his gaze even as Kaken enters the ambulance alongside him, even as the paramedics begin to do an assessment of his injuries. He keeps looking at Izuku until the very last moment before the ambulance doors close, and Izuku drifts off into a muddy world of unconsciousness. When Izuku awakes, there's no sign of either of them. Instead, he wakes up in a hospital bed with bandages over his remarkably stiff hands. Scratch that, his whole body is stiff. He tries to move his body but groans immediately when it refuses to let him do so. A rustling sound off to the side draws his attention. He looks and is amazed, but not surprised, to see his mother, Kimi, and Yashiro, all 3 of them asleep. Inko and Kimi share the couch beside his bed, while Yashiro sits on the floor with his head leaning on the side of the sofa. Izuku's groaning and shifting quickly caused Inko's eyes to flutter open, and as soon as her gaze lands on Izuku, she gasps loudly. "Izuku!" she cries. Kimi's head, which had been resting on Inko's shoulder, falls to the couch with a soft thump as Izuku's mother rushes to his side. Izuku says, or tries to, his throat still a little dry. His mother looks ready to cry when she hears his voice, but she makes a brave effort to hold her tears back and instead smiles at her son. Izuku's up? Yashiro asks, yawning as he wakes up as well. Kimi's sitting up, grumpily rubbing at the side of her head. She's still wearing her audition clothes, a flowing white dress and beige heels, and there are telltale signs on her face of her makeup getting smudged in some places. Hey guys, Izuku rasps, grinning. What time is it? It's like 9 in the evening, Kimi says as she stretches, cat-like. She and Yashiro yawn again, almost in sync, and she glares blearily at the other boy. Did you? He breaks off when his voice seems to completely run dry, and he's quiet for a few seconds. Inko gently runs her fingers through his hair, telling him not to rush it. Did you come right straight after your audition? Yep, says Kimi, popping the pea. Got the internship, so don't worry about it. The blow dryer was a lifesaver. She looks at him meaningly as she says this, having been privy to his first encounter with the slime monster. Izuku wishes so bad that he could laugh. He settles for smiling as widely as his facial muscles will allow. You pulled some crazy stuff today, you know? Yashiro says, shaking his head as he gets up from the ground. Kimi told us you fought that thing off twice today. You had no choice with the first one, Kimi concedes. But there was absolutely no reason for you to rush into a full-scale villain attack like that. Weren't there pro-heroes at the scene this morning? Inko asks fretfully. Why did you rush in like that? We know your, situation may have put you there, but it was too dangerous even for you, sweetie. Izuku looks at them, the slightest movement feeling heavy to him. Did they tell you who the boy was? Who the slime villain was attacking? They all look at each other and shake their heads. No. Only that there were 2 of you, both middle schoolers, who'd been rushed to the hospital after the attack, Inko explains. Izuku leans back in his pillow, closing his eyes. It was Katsuki. It was Katsuki. Yashiro's eyes widen. As in Katsuki, I'll murder anyone who touches me? That one? Bakugo Katsuki? The only Katsuki we know, Yashiro, Izuku says, frowning. As in the Katsuki who ate the sugar gummies I got for you? The Katsuki who blew up Yuchan's desk in 6th grade? Katsuki who? I think we're all aware which Katsuki he's referring to, Yashiro. Kimi dryly cuts in, but she looks just a touch amused. Just making sure we're all talking about the same guy here, Yashiro says, holding his hands up appeasingly. Inko looks back at her son and takes his hand in her own. Is that why you rushed into action like that? Because it was Katsuki? Not just that, Izuku says, a little hesitant. There was a deep moment where we made eye contact, just for a bit. And his eyes looked so terrified that before I knew it, I was running to him. Bakugo? Terrified? Yashiro repeats. Like a deer. Izuku's voice cuts off again, and he swallows forcefully. He waves his hands around in a vague you-get-it gesture. Inko's eyes look incredibly sad. So, the burns? The doctors told us you had terrible burns on your hands when you were brought in. A whole team worked on them as soon as you got here, and they say they were able to alleviate most of the damage and scarring, but they were terrible burns, Izuku. She takes a deep breath. Did Katsuki give you those burns? Izuku's face falls. Slowly, hesitantly, he nods once. Immediately, Yashiro's expression is filled with anger. That BS sturdy, he growls. Almost simultaneously, Kimi's face twists with disgust. After you saved him? She asks. Izuku shakes his head quickly and implores them with his eyes to stop. Inko understands his message and gently gestures at them to stop. I thought the slime monster is weak to heat, Izuku begins. I told him to use his explosions so that the monster would be forced to let go. I kept clawing at the slime to help him get free, but while I was shouting, my mouth was open. Vulnerable. The slime poured in almost immediately, and I was reaching out blindly to free his hands. I think he saw the slime monster about to get me, so he used his hands and his feet to explode the monster. He cuts off here, throat protesting at this extended use. I was holding onto his hands at the time. He looks at each of them in turn, eyes pleading. It's not his fault. Yashiro and Kimi still look angry, as if they're willing to take arms and ambush Katsuki right this minute, but Inko shoots them both a scolding look. Okay, sweetie, she tells Izuku, a small, comforting smile on her face. Why don't I get you some water for now, and then we can all go back to sleep. The doctors say they'll need to keep you in for another day at least to monitor the condition of your hands. Kimi settles back into the couch, distaste still barely concealed on her face, but doing a remarkable job of keeping her temper in check. Our parents are letting us spend the night here, she informs him, then groans. I should have packed face wash. My face is gonna be all broken out tomorrow if I sleep in makeup. At least it's after your audition, Yashiro snickers, but is silenced yet again by Kimi's powerful glare. I have some cleansing wipes in my bag, Inko says consolingly, diffusing the tension. Are you hungry, Izuku? Izuku shakes his head. He doesn't feel hungry per se, just a pervasive stiffness that makes any movement more painful than usual. Like shaking his head. Is it painful? Yashiro asks, noticing the way he'd winced. Izuku makes a non-committal shrug, then says, just a little. Too painful for a cuddle bunch? Inko says, extending her arms. Behind her, Yashiro and Kimi perk up, twin smiles on their faces as they raise their arms towards him as well. Izuku fights the color flooding his face, as well as the powerful urge to roll his eyes. Ever since Yashiro had jokingly named their group hugs as cuddle bunches some time ago, the term had unfortunately stuck, and all of three of them were prone to shouting cuddle bunch whenever Izuku got back from a Quirk incident. They're actually very pleasant and Izuku secretly likes being in the middle of them, but the name has never failed to make him feel embarrassed. It doesn't help that Inko's the only one of the three who uses the term unironically. Sakai, he mumbles reluctantly, and that's all the permission they need before they crowd Izuku and gently wrap their arms around him. They've mastered the art of four-way group hugs, and their limbs settle comfortably all around him. Izuku closes his eyes and basks quietly in their affection, feeling his body go boneless with content. For a few moments, everything is peaceful. Izuku forgets the events of the day and focuses on Yashiro's heartbeat, the softness of his mother, and Kimi's long hair tickling the side of his ear. Eventually, when they've all had their fill, they let go. Yashiro's the first to step back. That was nice, he says, stretching. I could totally fall asleep right now. We should all get back to sleep, Inko says, stepping away to rummage in her handbag. She pulls out a pack of wipes which she hands to Kimi, who takes them gratefully. You don't need anything, Izuku? Maybe water, Izuku says. Oh, how could I forget? Inko says, clasping her hands together. She rummages once more in her bag, pulling out a small water bottle. I packed a bag as soon as the hospital called me, she explains, handing the bottle to him. Izuku winces. He doesn't want to think about his mother's reaction to the call. The last time the hospital had called her had been nearly 3 years ago. And he refuses to think of what had happened then, refuses to think how the exact same thing had almost happened today. By the way, Inko says as she and Kimi settle back into the couch. Yashiro's already passed out, breathing puffs of frost in the air. Izuku has noticed before that he sometimes uses his quirk like this when he falls asleep. It's hilarious. And also convenient as hell during the summer. A very tall and thin man came over sometime today, asking to see you. He looked very worried, she says. His name, I can't quite remember. Tashinori. Yagi Tashinori? Izuki supplies. Only one man he knows fits that description. Yes. Inko says. I feel bad for forgetting his name. The doctors told us that he'd pulled some strings to get a professional healer to come in and help with your hands. Really? Izuku supposes that if the man knew several heroes personally, then he should have other connections. That's kind of him. Your stay in the hospital is being covered as well, Inko says happily. Yagi-sen must be an important man if he can do such a thing. I wish I could have thanked him properly, but he left before I could say much. I see. Izuku would have to thank him as well. He doesn't know how Yagi could have possibly known that he's here at this particular hospital, but considering that he'd asked Izuku to meet him at the expo, he must have seen the incident and recognized Izuku. Still, to do all that, isn't it amazing how kind people can be? Inko says brightly, shifting her arms to gently support Kimi, who's dozed off. You're very lucky, Izuku. Izuku knows. He has a wonderful mother and two amazing friends. Despite everything else he pretty much hates in his life, these people make it worthwhile to push on. He really has to thank Yagi. The man in question visits the very next day, just after Yashiro and Kimi had left. Inko jumps up from her seat the minute Yagi walks in, and seems determined on shaking his hand until his arm falls out of its socket. Thank you so much, Yagi-san. Inko cries, tears already spilling over. Yagi doesn't know what to do besides waiting for her blubbering to stop. Izuku, who's already accustomed to his mother's tearful displays, smiles. Good to see you, Yagi-san, he says, his throat already much improved. Yagi smiles back, but his eyes look serious. Inko finally manages to compose herself and lets go of Yagi's embattled hand. Again, you have my sincerest gratitude, Inko says. We can't possibly thank you enough for everything that you've done. Yagi holds up a hand. It's the least I could do after all your son has gone through. Speaking of which, how is he recovering? Izuku holds up his hands. The doctors had carefully removed the bandages this morning, revealing scarred palms. The burns had healed remarkably well after the immediate treatment, but Izuku was advised to be careful with them. He had been warned that most of his sweat glands had been destroyed, and his nerves had been affected. They had only been able to lessen the effects. The damage had been too severe to completely reverse. They're a little numb, Izuku explains. But I'm lucky that only my palms are scarred. I can move them around and everything. They told me I just have to pay special attention to the skin, especially for the next few months. He sets them down and looks at Yagi, his eyes sparkling. Speaking of which, they told me that recovery girl herself came to heal me, he said enthusiastically. Were you the one who contacted her? Yagi's expression is fond. Yes. She's an old friend of mine. I asked this small favor of her and she graciously agreed. You should thank her, not me. I wish I could meet her myself, Izuku says wistfully, looking at his hands. But since you seem close with her, do you mind giving her my thanks for me? We owe her so much. Inko nods emphatically. Yes, mine as well. We're eternally in your debt, Yagi-san. Please, Yagi says, raising his hand again. It's nothing. Still, you must be quite important if you were able to do all that, Izuku says, beaming. Can you tell me how you met her? And all the other heroes that you know? I've been dying to ask you ever since you told me. Yagi's face adopts a serious, almost haunted expression. About that, he begins, but then turns to look at Inko standing by the bedside. She meets his gaze, slightly nonplussed by the sternness in his eyes. I'm terribly sorry, but would it be possible to speak with Izuku for a bit? He asks her. Alone. Izuku's face knots in confusion. But, does she have to go? Are your meetings confidential? Mom can keep a secret, so it shouldn't be a problem even if she listens in. No. Yagi says firmly, but apologetically. What I'm about to tell you is substantially more important than that. And I'm sorry to say that I cannot yet allow your mother to know about it. Izuku's expression darkens, and he opens his mouth to protest further when Inko speaks. I understand, Yasen, she says, but she looks guarded. Gone is the welcoming face she had put on when Yagi first entered the room. For the sake of what you've done for my son, I'll respect this, but please know that I'm placing my trust in you. I hope for your sake that this secret of yours won't put my son in unnecessary danger. Yagi looks miserable. He nods once. Inko looks at him, gaze steely. Then she turns to her son and smiles. Will you be okay without me, Izuku? Izuku nods once, hesitant. Yeah. Will you be okay? Oh, don't mind me, Izuku, she says dismissively. I'll take this time to go home and get some more of your stuff to make you more comfortable here. I should probably get some more supplies as well. She looks at Yagi. That should give you ample time to talk, yes? More than enough, Yagi says. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Inko says, and Izuku remembers that for all her gentleness and timidity, Inko is a mother first and foremost, one who would lay down everything to protect her son. The gratitude and appreciation she so clearly felt for Yagi is laid aside the minute he implies that her son could be placed in danger. He feels a surge of affection for her, and is sorry to see her back as she leaves with a final wave to him. Once she leaves, he turns to Yagi, who seems uncomfortable. Well, he prompts. What's so important that you had to send my mom away to tell me? Yagi is silent for a moment. Perhaps it's better if I simply show you. Izuku watches, confused as Yagi walks around the room, pushing various objects up against the walls. It looks almost as if he's making room for something. I'm getting a little scared, Izuku jokes, but he's genuinely a little nervous. Are you gonna summon a demon or something? Is that how you know so many heroes? Nothing so dramatic, Yagi says, and then literally inflates. Izuku's jaw falls open. Only the very fresh memory of the slime villain forcing itself into him prompts him to snap it shut almost as quickly. Because where Tashinori Yagi had been standing, All Might has just appeared. All Might? Izuku stutters, then promptly cuts himself off before he does something like scream, eyes wide. Better not to alert anyone that All Might, the number one hero, the symbol of peace, is here in his hospital ward, and holy shit, did the doctors put something trippy in his medicine? Where did Yagi-san go? All Might laughs his signature laugh, robust and booming and a little too loud. Fear not, young Midoriya. I may look different, but it is still I, Tashinori-ya. He's cut off as he dissolves into a violent fit of coughing, and yep, there's the blood. The All Might's Tashinori Yagi case is getting a lot stronger. It still doesn't make any FNG sense, though. How? Izuku asks, because that seems like the most logical question at the moment. All Might laughs again, only to disappear in a cloud of smoke? Steam? Izuku turns away from the vapors and only looks back once he hears Yagi's familiar coughing. Thankfully, he's assumed his normal lanky form again, suddenly taking up a lot less space than just a moment ago. Yes, well, Yagi says, looking uncomfortable once again now that he's back to his smaller form. I understand that this is a lot to take in. You don't say, Izuku cuts in blandly, still reeling. But allow me to explain. You understand, of course, that me revealing this to you is nothing short of monumental? Yagi continues. He walks away to retrieve a chair he'd moved in order to place it closer to Izuku's bed. You understand the magnitude of the secret I just shared with you? You telling Mom to leave makes a whole lot more sense, yes, Izuku says. His mind is still going at 100 thoughts per second. If Yagi is All Might, and Izuku's been talking his ear off all the time about heroes' quirks, then Yagi's inputs, holy shit, they must have come from first-hand observations. And if All Might is Yagi, then that's how he'd known which hospital Izuku was taken to, how he probably managed to single-handedly cover all the expenses, and, most importantly, how he knows Recovery Girl, the youthful hero, in the first place. A lot of puzzle pieces are falling into place, but as they do so, more are only being thrown into the mix, raising even bigger questions. Perhaps I should start by explaining why my civilian persona looks so different, Yagi says carefully, sitting down. He coughs briefly, holding his hand up when Izuku begins to lean towards the tissues on the table. No, I'm fine, these coughing fits are part of it. Yagi leans back and slowly lifts the hem of his shirt. Under the fabric is a horrific mess of scars, dark and purple like bruises, extending out from one central point at the side of Yagi's abdomen. I received this scar in a terrible fight nearly 3 years ago. The encounter left me nearly dead, and was promptly hushed up before the public could learn about it. To this day, almost no one knows that I was involved in that battle. Pictures have been doctored, witness accounts have been debunked as false sightings, and every news media outlet has been paid a considerable amount to make sure I'm not mentioned in the fight. Only the internet remains unchecked, but it's easy to write off anything published there as a simple conspiracy. Izuku's brow wrinkles. Can I ask which fight that was? He asks slowly. Yagi hesitates. I'll tell you the rest of what I have to say before I tell you more about the fight. Is that fair? He says. Izuku thinks it over, then nods, prompting him to continue. The wounds I sustained in that fight took a terrible toll on my body. I underwent several surgeries, but many of my internal organs suffered damage too severe to heal completely. Some even had to be removed. To my doctors, I'm considered a medical miracle. Anyone else would have died straight away at the fight itself. He puts his shirt down, covering the scars. The stress of the medical procedures I went through reduced me to this lesser form that you're more familiar with. Currently, I'm only able to perform my hero duties 3 hours a day. He grimaces. For 3 hours a day, I'm able to posture as the All Might you and everybody knows, before the stress becomes too much for my body. Past that time limit, I'm forced to drop the ruse and revert to this form. Izuku ponders this. So, the overall lesser activity of All Might, but increased sightings in Mizudafu. Did you settle down somewhere here? Yagi nods. Yes. Recently, my doctors have advised me to settle down in one locality and refrain from going around too much in order to lessen my exertion. Even for only 3 hours a day, going around Japan like I used to be able to is too much for my body to handle. He shakes his head bitterly. I've become a fragile shell of the man I used to be. Izuku frowns at the expression on Yagi's face. Despite that, you persisted, Yagi-san, he says quietly. You don't have any illusions of your own greatness or your capability. You accepted the truth and moved on in spite of it. You continue to do what you can even after what you've been through. He looks down and smiles sadly. That's still a lot more than I can say about most heroes. When he looks at Yagi, the man looks incredibly sad. Thank you, young man, he says. I suppose that I never thought of it that way. Izuku smiles gently at him before asking, why are you telling me all this anyway, Yagi-san? He tilts his head slightly. Like you said, this is a massive secret you're revealing to me. I'll keep it safe, of course, but I don't see the reason why I needed to be informed of this. That is going to be partially answered by another huge secret, Yagi says. What is it? Izuku prompts, already wary. Once upon a time, I asked you why you didn't want to be a hero, and the first reason you gave me was that you're quirkless, Yagi begins. He meets Izuku's eyes, expression stormy and intense. What if I told you that I had a way to give you a quirk? A powerful one at that? Izuku blanches. You don't mean? He trails off. I can give you my quirk, young Midoriya, Yagi says. With it, you can do great things. Well, dear men. If that statement isn't textbook heroic, Izuku doesn't know what is. But as for what he's actually saying, hold on, Izuku says, waving his hands frantically around. First of all, I don't know what your quirk is. Nobody knows. Do you know how many internet forums I've visited that are dedicated solely to theorizing what your quirk is? Do you know how many of those were written by me? And secondly, no quirks can be passed on between two people like what you're implying. Do you even know how dangerous that could be? What if someone tried to take it? What if someone... Slow down, young man, Yagi interrupts, breaking into a small laugh. I'll explain all that if you'll allow me. Izuku flushes and closes his mouth. He's about to learn what All Might's quirk is. Everybody on the All Might forum would be foaming at the mouth if they ever knew what he was about to learn. My quirk, on a superficial level, appears to be a strength quirk, Yagi begins. Or a superior muscle augmentation quirk. I believe that is that most popular theory, yes. Yes, Izuku mumbles. Many threads theorized him having outlandish quirks such as radioactive blood that powered his whole body, or even photosynthetic qualities that allowed him to draw power from the sun, but Occam's razor usually prevailed against those theories, favoring the idea of a simple yet freakishly powerful strengthening quirk. It is slightly more complex than that. My quirk, you see, is more like a gigantic reservoir of energy, an unquantifiable and almost endless amount of energy that sits in my body, waiting for it to be used. In terms of use, it's quite flexible. I can use it to harden my body against attacks, strengthen the muscles I use in combat, or simply as an energy source to heighten my endurance and stamina. Izuku's face contorts into one of incredible concentration. Amazing! So it's like this amazing power you can enhance every aspect of your body with. And it's endless? How do you know? He asks, just barely keeping from dissolving into a mumbling fit in favor of prodding All Might's quirk further. Because my quirk is, specifically, a stockpile quirk, Yagi says. One that essentially grows the more it is cultivated. A stockpile quirk? Izuku repeats. One that gets more powerful as it's developed, so, no way. Yes, Yagi says, confirming Izuku's unsaid thought. I'm not the first to hold this quirk. I'm the 8th holder, in fact, the holder of the most powerful iteration of One for All thus far. This quirk, as far as I know, is the only quirk that can be passed on, and it can never be taken against the holder's will. It has to be given willingly and not through force. One for All, Izuku breathes out. Is that the name of your quirk? Yes, says Yagi. And if you agree, it could become your quirk. That statement effectively cuts off all of Izuku's brain activity. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because I have been looking for a successor, have been doing so, in fact, since I suffered this injury, Yagi says. And I believe that I may have found that successor in you. He looks down. From the very first moment we met, you exhibited a selflessness and heroic side that I've rarely seen in other people, even other heroes. The way you moved and handled that situation spoke volumes to me in such a profound way. When you told me that you were quirkless, I thought it was too perfect. Every single user of One for All, including me, was quirkless before receiving it. I thought I had found the perfect successor, and yet you promptly and quite firmly told me that you didn't want to be a hero. Even with his face downcast, Yagi's face visibly softens. And yet, as I got to know you and spend time with you, I bore witness to more and more your deeds. To the way you rescue people without a second thought. To the incredible way you would rush to the aid of others without any expectation of reward. You were, without a doubt, someone who simply couldn't help but help others. He raises his head and injects conviction into his voice. The world needs someone like you, Midoriya Izuku. You can be a hero. No, you already are a hero. With that one final statement, Izuku knows he can't keep the charade up any longer. Yagi-sen, he says quietly, refusing to meet the man's eyes, which hold so much trust and belief. I have something to tell you in return. What is it, young Midoriya? Yagi asks nervously. This is not exactly the reaction he'd been expecting after his passionate declaration. It's only fair that I tell you, after everything that you've told me, Izuku begins. It's something I also have never told anyone, only 3 other people know. My mother and my 2 best friends. He turns to face the window and says, without preamble, I'm not actually quirkless. I'm not actually quirkless. Before Yagi can react or intervene, he presses on. My quirk basically acts as a trouble sensor, or a radar. It alerts me to any situations where, I guess, aid is needed. When I was younger, it was just small things, rescuing cats from trees, or stepping in when someone was being bullied. As I got older, it became more and more dangerous, and I've been getting into the kind of situations you saw me in. That time at the convenience store? My quirk. The time at the bakery in the park? All my quirk. That granny I helped, that girl and her dog, that pizza DLVY guy? I was only able to help them because of my quirk, Izuku says. He speaks blandly, unemotionally. He hates this. He hates having to talk about his quirk like this, and possibly losing Yagi's admiration and respect for good. I don't tell people about my quirk for several reasons, but one of the biggest is that if people knew, they'd try to put me in the hero industry. Or if not, count on me to solve their problems. If I ever fail to save anyone, the blame will rest on my shoulders for not being able to act accordingly. He closes his eyes and imagines the day his grandfather had died. He's long since made the connection between that incident and the stabbing pains in his gut he'd mistaken for stomach cramps at the time. That's more than I can handle, to be honest. He finally turns his head to look at Yagi. I'm really grateful and glad that you trusted me enough to share this secret with me. It can't have been an easy decision. I hope I'm making something clear. I'm not the hero you think I am, Yagi-sen. I'm just a boy who may as well be quirkless, someone who can only help other people out because of quirk I never asked for. I'm not the hero you think I am, Yagi-san. I can't be a hero, Yagi-san, he concludes, with a clear air of finality. The air is thick and silent after that statement. Yagi's expression is unreadable, but obviously tense. He searches Izuku's face, but the boy knows he will find nothing but conviction there. Even if he wanted to, someone like Izuku will never be suited to being a hero. He's praised and thanked for the way he saves people, and nobody even knows how undeserving he actually is of their gratitude. Thank goodness, Yagi says. I thought I was going crazy. Izuku tilts his head, confused. Yagi-san, I have never in my life met anyone who got into the kind of situations you do as frequently as you do, Yagi says. I'd say the only person who even comes close is me, and me being me, that's kind of my job. You having a quirk suddenly makes things a whole lot clearer. He stands up from his chair. As for everything else you've told me, I see that I won't be convincing you to take my quirk anytime soon. If it caused you any additional stress, I apologize. I completely trust that you'll keep anyone from finding out. He smiles at Izuku kindly, but the boy sees through it immediately. It's fragile, brittle, just barely managing to show up on his sunken face. Nothing you've told me changes my opinion of you. You're still a kind, helpful, and courageous young man. He pauses, then appears to think better of what he might have said. Instead, he ruffles Izuku's hair. Get better soon, you hear? I'll be waiting for you to join me for a jog again. As he moves to leave the room, Izuku calls out to him just before he exits. Yagi-san. The man turns back. Yes, young Midoriya? But I'm sorry, he says lamely, not knowing how to communicate the regret he feels at causing the disappointment evident in the man's face, manner, and voice. Yagi smiles slightly. Don't be, he says, his voice sadder than Izuku could bear. It's not your fault. He is not the only visitor that Izuku receives. Soon after his mother returns to a quiet and pensive Izuku, someone else knocks on the door. Or, more accurately, bangs on it until Inko rushes to open it. Oh, Katsuki, is that you? Inko says incredulously. Izuku, for the first time since Yagi left earlier, snaps to attention. Katsuki is standing in the doorframe, obviously uncomfortable, but doing a good job of covering it up with hostility. Yeah, he says, clearly attempting to rein in his normal tone in front of Inko. Come in, come in. Inko says, ushering him frantically through the door. It reminds Izuku of the way she had welcomed Yagi in just this morning, and he hopes this won't turn into an intense conversation like it had. However, judging from the way Katsuki's looking at him, he's pretty sure it won't be the case. How are you, Katsuki? Inko asks as soon as the blonde boy's seated on the sofa. We heard you'd been rushed to the hospital with Izuku here yesterday as well. Have your injuries healed? Katsuki nods curtly. Yeah, I wasn't too banged up, he says. He holds up his arms, covered lightly in bandages. I just got some cuts and burns from using my quirk too much. He freezes slightly, then looks at Izuku. Speaking of that, that's weird. I'm just gonna keep calling you Deku, okay? Okay, Izuku says, laughing softly. He holds out his palms. If you wanted to ask about my hands, Kaken, here, they're scarred, but basically healed. Kaken, I can call you Kaken, right? Katsuki flushes and looks like he wants nothing more than to vehemently refuse, but Inko is watching the conversation with hopeful, starry eyes. She was never made aware of the reason behind Izuku and Katsuki's fallout nearly 2 years ago, and was greatly saddened by the sudden loss of one of Izuku's closest friends. Katsuki visibly restrains himself from saying no outright, but Inko's pleading look is too powerful. Yeah, whatever, he eventually mutters. Izuku smiles. Maybe they haven't changed too much, the two of them. After that, however, things get slightly awkward. It's evident that Kaken came in order to talk to Izuku about something, but Inko's oblivious. She sits there with them, wondering why they don't talk more. Surely, after 2 years of not seeing each other, not to mention sharing a near-death experience, they've got a lot to speak about. Eventually, Izuku takes the initiative. I'm sorry for asking this again, but would you mind if I talk to Kaken? Inko beams. That's more like it. Not at all. Please, go ahead you two. Privately, Izuku clarifies. Is it okay if you, left the room for a bit? Inko claps her hands over her mouth. Oh, so that's why, goodness. This conversation wouldn't progress while she was still around. Oh my. Of course, Izuku. I'm sorry, you know I'm terrible at reading the air, she says apologetically. Her precious son smiles. It's alright, Mum. It's just, we haven't talked to each other in such a long time. Of course, of course. You two must have so much to catch up on, Inko says. She gets up in a hurry. I think I'll go down to the cafeteria and see if they have anything for snacks, she says. Do you want anything? Katsuki? No, they say in unison. They catch each other's eye briefly, and Inko swells with happiness. Maybe they'll become good friends again, she hopes. I'll be going now, Izuku. I have my phone with me, so call me if you need anything, okay? She says. Izuku nods, and watches his mother practically bounce on her heels as she leaves the room. Even when she leaves, the two boys stay silent. Things didn't get any less awkward at all. So, you're all healed up now? Izuku asks lamely, a poor attempt at a conversation starter. Apparently, Kaken thinks so as well, because he doesn't dignify at his response. Kaken will obviously speak in his own time, so all Izuku can do now is wait. Just before the silence gets too unbearable, Kaken finally deigns to look at him and ask, "Why don't you want to be a hero?" His voice and question is blunt and undeniable. Izuku won't be able to deter him. I thought we've discussed this when we were kids, Kaken, Izuku begins, but is cut off by Kaken. Don't give me that bullshit about being quirkless or you don't have to be a hero to help people, Kaken, he says, his voice turning up mockingly on the last part of the sentence. He sneers at Izuku. We both know those are just FING excuses. You sure as shit didn't need a quirk to jump in there and save my butt. Izuku cannot reply, for one, because he doesn't know what to answer, and two, did Kaken just willingly admit that Izuku had saved him? So I want you to tell me the real reason you FING hate heroes, got it, dipshit? And then I'm effing right off and leaving you the hell alone. It's not like we'll have any reason to continue talking after all this, Kaken says, crossing his arms and looking sternly at him. Izuku looks down. After this, Kaken will enroll at UA and go on to become a hero. Maybe even a top hero. And Izuku will return to his life, enroll at some prestigious university, and find a job while he rescues cats on the side until he dies. Before that happens, they need closure. And so, maybe he can't tell Kaken about his quirk. But maybe after everything he at least deserves to know this. You probably don't remember my father, do you, Kaken? He asks. When Kaken's only reply is to tilt his head, Izuku continues. You probably don't. We were both only 2 years old when he died, and even I don't have that many memories of him. But did you know that he was a pro hero? For real? Kaken asks in disbelief. When Izuku nods, he says, F-. I didn't know. His hero name was Salamander because of his fire breath. Grandpa used to tell me all the time that he was really, really powerful. He was naturally good at any offensive encounters, but flexible in any other situation. When Dad was active, crime rate in Mizudafu really dropped. Dad met Mom when he rescued her from a train crash, Izuku says. He pauses to smile fondly but sadly at the memory of his mother telling him all about how she had met his father. According to her, she had fallen in love at first sight. And they got married and had me. Only thing is, I don't think Mom really understood how busy being a pro hero could get. She was understanding, of course. Have you even met her? But raising me practically on her own took its toll. Dad could be gone for days or weeks on end without any word from him. Grandpa and Mom told me that I used to get really mad but clingy with Dad whenever he came home. Said that I would cry at the sight of him, but as soon as I calmed down I would latch onto his leg and refuse to let go. Those times were the only times I got to spend with him, before he inevitably got called off to some mission again, so I wouldn't leave his side at all. Of the 2 birthdays I had while he was alive, he couldn't attend either. He was busy fighting crime, I guess. Kaken snorts. So are you telling me that your whole grudge against heroes is founded on your FING daddy issues? He says. Because let me tell you right there, that's effing petty. Pettier than screaming at your best friend for helping you up after you fall off a bridge? Izuku shoots back immediately. Kaken acknowledges the barb with nothing more than a nod and a slightly deeper scowl. Whatever, Deku. Izuku smiles slightly. He knows when Kaken can't come up with a decent comeback. My grudge was definitely founded on those daddy issues, if that's how you want to put it, but it really started to grow once Dad died. The news outlets reported the incident as a massive scandal. Apparently, Dad was out on a mission with his teammates. Not just temporary partners from other agencies, his teammates that he's been in the business with practically since his debut. They came up against a really strong villain. Is this sounding familiar yet? Kaken shrugs noncommittally. Dunno. FNG, get to the point already. Well, the short story is that Dad got caught in the attack while he tried to defend some civilians who'd strayed into the area. And then he got captured by one of the villain's helpers. He called out for help from his teammates, but Izuku's face darkens. They abandoned him. Dad had been the strongest member on that team. Without him and his leadership, they quickly fell apart. They had no idea what to do. Eventually, more hero agencies had to get involved because the villain couldn't be contained. The scandal came up when it was revealed that Dad's teammates essentially fled the scene. They hadn't been the ones to contact the hero agencies, nor did they stay to try and contain the villain. When they saw that their leader had been captured, they turned tail and abandoned him. By the time the other pro-heroes got there, Dad had already been killed. He was just mingling with the other corpses at the scene, Izuku says dispassionately. He'd cried his eyes out when Grandpa had first told him this story, but it has since become fuel feeding into his hatred of the hero industry. After the incident, his teammates retired from the business. Couldn't handle the media firestorm that followed, I guess, and they had no real leader to follow. Dad's body was retrieved, returned to us, and buried with a gold medal for his service. That's when I first realized that heroes aren't everything they're cracked up to be. He looks at Kaken, who's still listening intently. You already know how Grandpa died. It's really FANG similar to how Dad died, except he was an innocent civilian. I didn't tell you about Red Eagle and Duodenum attending his funeral though, did I? Kaken shakes his head. Well, they did. And from what I hear, Red Eagle's retired from the hero industry as well. I think she's making support items now. I'm a little glad. I don't think she was prepared for the reality of being a hero. He chuckles a little bitterly. Well, anyway, there you have it, Kaken. That's it. That's my sob story. My hero grudge is founded not just on my daddy issues, but on my grandpa issues as well. He looks away. That I guess it all still sounds kind of petty, huh? Kaken stares coolly at him. So basically, what you're telling me is that you find the heroes fake, he asks flatly. And that they pretend to be FING perfect when actually they're cowards once things get dangerous. Izuku meets his gaze levelly. I don't think all of them are, he says quietly. Not even most of them. I'm fully aware that selfless, true heroes exist within the industry and are making the world a better place in their own way. But you've never lost a loved one to this industry, he ends up saying. You've never had your world shattered in front of you, let alone twice. He stares at his hands, twin scars resting on each of them. How can I feel anything but hate for something that took so much from me? How can I feel anything but hate for something that took so much from me? Kaken is silent. Then he scoffs and stands up from the sofa. I get it, Deku, he says, walking towards the door. I won't FNG pester you about this anymore. We probably won't see each other again after this, anyway. He pauses, just as his hand rests on the doorknob. I'm going to be a hero, he says slowly, face turned away from Izuku. And not just any shitty hero, the best hero. I don't care about All Might, I'll earn my license and FNG beat him out from the #1 spot, fair and square. And I'll blast the sheet out of any hero or villain who gets in my way. And not once will I ever run away from anything, he declares, and he turns to meet Izuku's eyes. Izuku sees quiet conviction and determination in those red irises, a far cry from the usual egotistic pride that resided in them. Not from a shitty villain. Not from a civilian who needs help. Not from anyone or anything, when I know I can effing help. He chuckles sharply. I'm gonna be a million times better than those BSs, so you don't have to effing worry about hating me when I become #1 hero, Deku. No, Izuku says quietly. I suppose I don't. Yeah, you don't, Kaken bites out. His face twists in concentration, then abruptly floods with color. As quickly as it happens, he turns away to face the door. I'm only gonna say this once, so get the FING cotton out of your ears and listen, because I'm not repeating it, he grits out, the effort of saying what he's about to say obviously painful. He takes a deep breath and turns around once more to look at Izuku. Thanks for saving me, he says. Not just yesterday but 2 years ago too. And I'm sorry I was such a gigantic D to you, okay? Kaken, Izuku begins, but the other boy silences him with a truly powerful glare. Not another word, he says murderously. He promptly opens the door and leaves, shutting it loudly behind him. Izuku can only stare. He's still for just a moment, before falling into his pillow. Maybe Kaken has changed. The old Kaken he knew would have never, in a million years, admitted to being saved. Or apologize. Or acknowledge being wrong in any way, really. Izuku thinks back to his declaration. Not from anyone or anything when I know I can help. Kaken, Izuku whispers. Kaken, then what does that make me? When Inko returns, she's distressed to find that her son has cried himself to sleep. Toshinori sits on the wall of Dagoba Beach. The piles of trash and junk rise as high as ever, blocking out what could potentially be one of the most appealing coastal views in Japan. When young Midoriya had first seen it on one of their morning jogs, he'd stopped in his tracks and dissolved into a passionate mumbling fit about the dangers of such pollution and different heroes who could solve it, if they could be bothered to do so. Izuku. It seems that no matter what he does, Toshinori cannot stop thinking about the young boy. If he could turn back time, he would go back to that room in the hospital and take back everything he had told him. It was unfair of him to offer such a terrible responsibility to someone so young. Toshinori knows firsthand the incredible burden that comes with accepting one for all. But in his excitement at finding such a perfect successor, he'd assumed that Izuku could eventually be convinced despite his words. After all, he was a textbook hero. An ideal one. You're so much better at all this people stuff, Nana, Toshinori thinks wistfully, remembering his charismatic mentor. You would have handled him so much better. Instead, Toshinori had endangered a 14-year-old boy by bestowing upon him a monumental secret he hadn't asked to know, and in the process dragged out old wounds and mental struggles that the boy had probably never wanted to discuss in the first place. It's been almost a week since that day. He knows from the doctors at the hospital that Izuku had been discharged the day after. After all, he's the one who paid for his treatment. He'd also paid for the treatment of that other boy. Ikugu, he believes his name was. Since then, he hasn't encountered Izuku once. That might have to do with how he's avoiding the places he knows Izuku frequents. Toshinori doesn't quite know how to face the boy after everything that's happened. He knows he needs to apologize to him at some point, but he can't quite muster the courage to do it. Funny, how he never once backed down from the most terrifying of enemies, but a simple, I'm sorry, becomes the most daunting task he's ever faced. He's so lost in thought that he doesn't notice the by now familiar sound of red sneakers crunching on gravel, until a boy with messy green hair sits himself right beside him. I thought I might find you here, Izuku says, and Toshinori will never admit in a million years that he just barely keeps himself from jumping right off the wall in surprise. Young Midoriya? Izuku smiles. If you're so easily caught off guard, I don't see how you survive to be the #1 hero for this long, he says, chuckling lightly. It's quite true. Over his extensive time as a hero, Toshinori has developed his senses and intuition many times over. He's normally hyper-aware and alert of his surroundings. He's always had to be. What can I say? He shrugs. I suppose I've gotten used to your presence. That's nice, Izuku says, like he isn't sure that word actually applies. I haven't run into you for a while. That's pretty strange, considering how often I used to see you before. Toshinori grimaces. It's odd, yes, he says, unwilling to admit that he'd been afraid of finally confronting the boy. It's pretty inconvenient since I've been wanting to talk to you, Yagi-san, Izuku says. He brings his knees up close to his face and holds them. I've thought a lot about what you told me back then. No. Toshinori won't be able to handle Izuku's sadness again. He absolutely does not want to ever be the cause of it again. Young Midoriya, he says hurriedly, trying to cut him off before he tells Toshinori how distraught he had made him feel. Before that, I want to apologize to you. I was completely out of line. I see now how unfair it was of me to push my expectations on you. Heroic or not, you're still a child. It was wrong of me to ask you to shoulder this burden, and to expose you to such a terrible secret. Izuku smiles at him, and his expression is terrible to behold, fond and yet miserable at the same time. He looks like someone whose heart has been broken and yet continues to hang on to his foolish feelings. I wasn't looking for you just to hear you say that to me, Yagi-sen, he says. I came to tell you that I've changed my mind. What? Toshinori says out loud. Izuku stares out at the piles of junk, his gaze probably reaching further than that to the horizon just beyond them. Like I said, I've been thinking a lot. About your quirk. About my quirk. About everything that I've done so far. I realized for the first time that my quirk was for life. That no matter what I did, the only way to escape it would be to die. Young Midoriya. Toshinori interrupts, worried by that train of thought. Izuku shakes his head lightly. I'm fine, Yagi-san. I have a wonderful mother and 2 friends who worry about me more than should be normal, so I don't entertain those thoughts anymore, Izuku says dismissively. Anymore, Toshinori thinks, and is filled with a fresh wave of regret at what he must have put this boy through. Anyway, after you left, a friend of mine visited me as well. It was the boy I rescued from the slime monster. You see, it's always been his dream to become an outstanding pro-hero. He's got the drive and determination to back up his powerful quirk, so I've no doubt he'll definitely achieve his dream. But something he said to me while he was there stuck with me. He told me that, when he becomes a hero, he would never run away, never from a villain, never from a civilian who needed help, never from any situation in which he knew he could help. And I realized that that was me. For as long as I've had this quirk, not once have I denied it. I've always rushed headfirst into all sorts of situations the moment I realized I had the capacity to help in any way, Izuku says, eyes distant. As long as I have this quirk, I will never have peace. Sure, I can try to live a normal life, but, he chuckles bitterly, this quirk will follow me until the day I die. So I figured. He smiles at Toshinori. I figured I might as well save as many people as I can along the way, right? No, Toshinori wants to say. Wants to scream. No, young Midoriya, he murmurs, eyes downcast. No, this isn't right. You're a child. It's not right. You shouldn't. I should never have asked you to even consider taking this burden. Izuku is silent. Then he stands up and kneels in front of Toshinori, forcing the man to meet his eyes. Yagi-san, he says. Thank you for crying for me. But I've long since accepted this fate. Meeting you and rescuing Kaken only solidified that acceptance. I will never escape it. I will never have the peace that I want. This is the best path that I can think to go on. So don't worry, Yagi-san. I've made up my mind on this. You're not forcing me into anything. That is a lie and they both know it. Young Midoriya, Toshinori says, tears coursing down his cheeks, humbled by the display of sheer strength of mind and misery in front of him. I'm sorry. Izuku laughs. Don't be, he says shakily. It's not your fault, Yagi-san. That afternoon, the golden sun cast its rays over Dagoba Beach like it had countless days before. But that day, its light also fell on the silhouette of 2 heroes, both weeping over the incredible weight of the world on their shoulders.